tiny people and we play with them. Woo, woo. We paint tiny people and we play with them.
Hello and welcome to episode 21 of Miniatures Monthly at the Crate and Crowbar. My name is Chris Thurston, and as ever, I am joined by Tom Senior.
Hello.
Hello, Tom.
Hello.
We're back for a new year.
We are.
You believe we've been doing this for 2 years now?
Oh no.
I know we're not at episode 24 yet, but I think we started in January 2 years ago.
God, that's probably true.
I think it is true.
2 years of hobby, and I guess like we started this podcast about a year after we sort of got into it.
Yeah.
So 3 years of hobby, picking it back up. And what are we going to do? We're going to accelerate? How are we going to raise the stakes for...
I think I'm just going to continue to paint men at a moderate pace and play a reasonable amount of games of Warhammer.
That sounds fantastic to me.
I'll tell you the big change is at some point in the next month or so, I'm going to finally get a driving license.
Ooh.
That's my major life change.
More tournaments, more...
Which means,
shopping.
yeah, well, it means a lot of things for my life. It means I can go to the shops, I can take things to the recycling centre more easily. But yes, it also means I can drive to Warhammer World. Finally, I can become the friend with a car who can go to events in Cardiff.
Imagine.
And so on. That's my major life change. But obviously, you know, huge congratulations to you, Tom, for embarking on a far more important life change because you just got engaged.
I did, literally days ago as we record this. So I'm now pending husband, or as I call my fiance, pending wife. She does enjoy.
Good. Congratulations on your new pending status.
Absolutely. And, you know, relationships can indeed flourish and continue under the hammer of Warhammer itself, and shows that these things are not in opposition.
I'm not sure how many people were arguing that they were, but
I don't know.
I would argue, in fact, that you know, it helps a great deal to be in a long-term relationship when you get back into Warhammer in your 30s.
True. That's definitely true. Yeah, much to be forgiven. So yeah, there's actually an article in The Guardian about Warhammer, a couple of weeks ago, and it was kind of almost the typical kind of snarky mainstream look at it, but it was also like there was something slightly warm about it as well. Like I think the phrase heroine for middle class boys is a reasonable assessment to an extent, but also there's still that, you still feel that stigma weirdly hanging off it in a way.
It's weird because I have met the person who wrote that article a few different times because he is a friend of Pip's, my partner.
Oh, right.
So and I think I last saw him at Pip's birthday party a couple of years ago in London, and that party was definitely full of middle-class boys that would subsequently go on to get back into Warhammer, including me. So, you know, ultimately, you know, I think the snark is coming from inside the house on this one.
Yeah, also I think it may have been a quote from Kieran Gillen, and that's a very Kieran thing to say. So,
it is, yeah.
Yeah, so you're right, maybe it's pure self-deprecation. And it's actually quite a nice article about GW's success and why they're doing so well at the moment. Yeah.
I mean, and, you know, it is because there's, you know, and in a sense, this is one of the reasons I think that extra congratulations to you, Tom, because, you know, I think we've argued, or I have argued on this podcast before, that the resurgence of miniatures stuff among people of our particular age group is partly because you accept the fact that you may never own a house or be able to afford a wedding. But what you can afford is a lot of plastic friends.
Yeah, a lot of plastic gold.
But actually, in embarking on at the very least, the wedding part of that equation, you are throwing off the idea that you're necessarily married to a storm host. No, you're also allowed to be married to a human person.
Very different relationship. A very platonic relationship with my Stormcast. I do love them though.
No one was asking about that. I definitely didn't ask that, Tom, but thank you for specifying.
I'm here to clarify.
So
good month.
Good, yeah, very good month. So we'll get on to obviously how our hobby months have been in a bit, but there's also been loads of news. So when we last recorded one of these podcasts just before Christmas, and since then there's been a really big sort of, I had the experience of obviously doing the previous podcast, planting my flag in the soil and saying I'm definitely kind of happy with the projects I currently have.
Yep.
And then weathering a sort of New Year's open day set of reveals by Games Workshop where I realized I wanted literally every single thing.
Gosh, there was so much. The thing that stood out for me was probably Gloomspite as an AOS player, and the fact that destruction just sort of daily needed something after we had Legions of Nagash last year, so it felt like it's destruction's turn to get the
right. Yeah, I feel like this is something that hasn't fully. I'm trying to think if this has happened yet. So broadly speaking, since AOS 2.0 and in the months surrounding it, we've had sort of two sets of precedent for how new AOS things come along. We've had entirely new armies like the Idoneth Deepkin or the what was I say? Caradon Overlords last year. You know, there's the precedent for an entirely new army.
Yes.
I'm leaving Stormcast out of this schema, because, by the way, because I think, like Space Marines, the poster faction for a given game kind of has a completely different way of being treated.
Yes.
Compared to everyone else. But then there was also the precedent for what it looks like when, a faction gets updated, like Beasts of Chaos or Legions of Nagash or something like that, where you get like a really good new book, and those are two of the best books they've done recently. Supplementary kind of accessories and stuff, maybe some terrain, but not like loads of new models.
No.
And then I think through both Nighthaunt and now Gloomspite Gitz, there's been this sort of sense of like what can happen when an existing faction gets put under gets given the kind of the real big treatment and suddenly gets kind of massively fleshed out. And I think it's even more notable in the case of Gloomspite Gitz, which would have previously been Moonclan, well, goblins of all kinds, grots of all kinds, and then previously night goblins, is because it's such a kind of beloved faction. It's been like one of the most exciting releases they've done in ages, I think.
Yeah.
It's like loads of really classic units like Fanatics and Squigs and things getting kind of like substantially reintroduced.
And I really, really love the Troggoths, or Trolls as they used to be. Probably that might be my favourite part of the release, because they are like, they're able to do a much larger scale, and they've kind of rescoped them. The proportions are different, and they've got like a super giant Troggoth as well, who is like a big, awesome monster unit, giant sized.
Yeah.
And so it was a release of extremely small creatures and then extremely large creatures, which will look great together on the tabletop. And I love seeing new Fanatics as well. And, indeed, like a double monster Squigs. That model's
that Mangler Squig model is genuinely, I think, one of the most impressive models new Games Workshop have done.
It's nuts, isn't it?
If you haven't looked at it closely, like, so it's two massive Squigs jumping over each other, covered in goblins, and it's basically just held together with thin lengths of chain.
Yes.
That kind of actually hold up the different parts of the model, and it's, you know, previously I think the most impressive bit of engineering they'd done was the Eidolon of Mithlan for the Idoneth Deepkin, like the big elf god wizard that is only held to the ground by drops of water dripping from his cape.
Yeah.
But this is genuinely extraordinary, because I think the problem with the Eidolon is it's actually quite a static pose. Despite him looking like a cresting wave, it's still sort of floaty wizard.
Yeah.
Whereas there's a sort of mad energy to the bouncing Squigs that is unlike anything they've done. It's those models are so good.
There's so many tiny details, like little small goblins that you won't spot the first time you look at it. You really have to go in close, and they're all doing something. They're all like, you know, eating a mushroom. We should talk about the wizard models as well. The
Gobapalooza is so. I went through so I've definitely been through the bit of a sort of journey this month in terms of trying to decide what my next project's going to be and what I'm interested in and how I relate to my shame pile. I'll definitely return to it, but like, one of my two armies when I was a teenage Warhammer Fantasy player, one of the two factions I loved the most were Night Goblins. I had Night Goblins and Skaven.
Yeah.
And, this made me sort of like, I've been all in on Chaos. Am I secretly a Night Goblin person? Am I going back? Like, you know, and those Gobapalooza models, which is just, it's a box that has like 5 heroes in it, and they must all be taken together, I think, or you need at least 3 of them.
Right.
They're really cheap little heroes that basically do one thing, and they're so good.
They're
like,
amazing.
If I wasn't busy with other projects, I would almost bought that box just to paint them.
Yes.
Because
there's
the one that's tripping out on mushrooms, and he's so good. He's just sat freaking out. And I saw someone describe him as looking like the sort of, the kind of like ideal image of Night Bus home from a rave, and it's perfect. Like,
yeah. So he's like hallucinating, or perhaps not. Like, it's part of the model is his hallucination, which I can't remember. Is like a flying.
He's fending off a flying mushroom with a half-eaten mushroom.
Yes, yeah. And there's the look of sheer terror on its face, of just like just total freak out mid captured.
But like not like typical sort of Warhammer battle terror, but a sort of like yeah. I mean, I love goblins. Anyone who's listened to main C&C or our D&D thing particularly will know that I have a fondness for like weird sort of psychedelic goblin stuff. Oh, it's so good.
Fantastic.
The guy, the one that's standing on the shoulders of a different goblin and holding a big mask up in order to be scary. Like, the great thing about goblins and grots in AOS is, they are far more expressive naturally than I think a lot of the factions are. Like, because there's no sort of desire for them to ever be kind of like seriously cool or kind of martially threatening.
Yeah.
They're always like, they're kind of like the sort of the gallery or the chorus of Warhammer, like in a sort of dramatic sense. Like they're there to kind of react to stuff and make fun of the bigger things that are happening. And they've done a really good job of, even though they set up this army and they are the main focus, there's still so many, like you say, so many little goblins kind of like hidden in the details, just reacting to the things that are happening.
Yeah.
Like the fanatics come with a little goblin who's thrown up
Right.
and passed out.
Yeah.
Like, there's something kind of very sympathetic about them and very relatable, but also really funny. Like there's some of my favorite models, honestly, just the way they react to stuff. And I think the only other faction that has that kind of like sort of pathos almost, like comedy sort of, very morbid pathos about them is Skaven, who also have the sort of like, they're the grotty little people at the bottom of the world reacting to all of these battles between far greater, grander figures than them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're great. I love those models. And I think the book as well, following in the tradition of the really good recent battle times like Beasts of Chaos, is like setting a really good precedent for what those army updates might look like, where you have like really cool over, sort of, you know, almost faction spanning abilities, but also the ability to create an entirely Squig army or create an entirely Troggoth army, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's super nice. And Legions is a little bit like that as well. It's like, it's binding together a lot of disparate elements almost into one thing that still gives you the options to field odd stuff. I'd love to look closer at the rules and see how Fanatics work now and what the Troggoths are like. Cause, I think it's like a good sign that I would buy one of those models just to paint it. I'd buy just a couple of Troggoths just to paint them up and try and do some, learn some techniques.
Yeah, they sold out super fast.
It doesn't surprise me. They're super good. Those are super nice.
Yeah, like we'll probably get to it, but I've got Moloch's Mob for Underworlds, which is Troggoth and his mushroom powers.
Oh yeah, that's hilarious.
And those models are great as well.
Hilarious. Really funny.
Yeah.
You don't associate like Games Workshop miniatures with humour necessarily from the outside unless you kind of like have collected for ages and understand their universes. So the idea of like, of what those Troggoths, or of, the famous example is the giant kit, the old giant kit, which is still brilliant, comes with a guy who's just a little man running away.
Yeah.
Like that sense of humour is just such an important part of Moon Clan. And
I think it's a big part of Destruction. I think it's one of the things that sort of differentiates Destruction from Chaos to some extent is, Chaos is much more of a horror thing, whereas even though obviously Destruction do horrific things, they're not necessarily like as sort of grotesque. You know what I mean? It's not about like, there's something kind of like fun and sort of like celebratory about destruction.
Exuberant, aren't they?
Yeah.
With the exception of perhaps the mammoths.
The Frost, the
Beastclaw Raiders.
Yeah.
They've got like a bit of a dark backstory to them and the fact that they're escaping this eternal winter, which is the most emo thing ever. But the models themselves are still like full of personality. And,
I wouldn't say emo. I'd say they're more like a kind of Finnish metal.
Right. Yeah, that's a good shout. And that has its own sort of fun.
Yeah, it does. But they're all fun, the Destruction factions.
Yeah, that's really true.
But yeah, and I think, one thing I'm really hoping is I sort of went through this, it was the thought process. My first part of the thought process, as I've said, was like, does this mean that I must buy goblins? And then the second part of that thought process for me was, I think this sets a precedent for what an update, for example, to Chaos Undivided might look like. So I'm pretty convinced at this point, although they've not revealed much, that when Dark Oath arrive, they will probably take this form. Like the new Dark Oath kits will probably replace what Chaos Marauders were, like barbarians in the old Chaos Forces.
Yeah, you'd expect
but they'll sit alongside old Slaves to Darkness. So I'm not actually expecting a Dark Oath battle tome this year. I'm expecting a Slaves to Darkness battle tome, which includes Dark Oath and Everchosen and that kind of thing.
That makes sense.
Because there's so much precedent now for an update like that, and I'm really excited about that. I think that'll be the next big direction for me.
So
It's a bit of a guess, but yeah.
what kind of models would you expect from them? We've seen the new warband, the sort of Dark Earth warband.
Well, I'm taking this partly from because the AOS rules for that warband were released, and I might be getting this wrong, but as far as I'm aware, Dark Oath isn't a keyword,
right?
Which it would be if they were a faction. Slaves to Darkness is their keyword. So they are Slaves to Darkness models. Like this was always the case. Like the Dark Oath War Queen's command ability affects Slaves to Darkness.
Right.
So, when that came out with Malign Portents last year, almost a year ago, the thought was, does this mean, this is temporary, whatever? But I don't think it was. I don't think it ever was. I think these are Slaves to Darkness models. I think the kits that are missing. So I think I think the old Marauder infantry basically needs to go. Like that is an old kit. That is as old as like the zombie kit.
Right.
It looks rubbish.
Yeah.
But the Marauder Horsemen are all right. And most of the other Slaves to Darkness kits are all right as well.
But presumably they can't ride horses in Age of Sigmar. So what will the new horses
dogs.
be? Yeah?
It'll be dogs because, there's a novella War Queen by Darius Hinks, which I may have mentioned. I think I mentioned on the last pod, but like, it does describe a lot of Dark Oath units. So I would expect dog chariots.
Wow, cool.
I think they will keep the horses. Like, I think they will keep Marauder Horsemen because Chaos Knights. Like, I think the only faction that's still allowed to ride horses is Chaos.
Right.
And it's because Chaos Knights are so iconic, like the kind of heavy cavalry sort of thing.
New Chaos Knights models would be amazing.
I don't think they'll happen.
No. Do you think Chaos Warriors as well, maybe?
I don't think so. Because I had this thought that, and I'm biased. And I'm biased for a reason that will become apparent. So, last month when I said, I think I'm done with my Shane Pile, I'm definitely not going to expand it.
Yeah.
I bought the Slaves to Darkness Battle Force, Tom.
Oh, no. What if they're about to change it all?
They're not. So I decided I've literally put my money where my mouth is. Because I actually asked this in Discord and I came to my own decision in the end. My thought was, does this battle force, which is Chaos Warriors, Knights, Chariots, that kind of thing, does this exist because these models are not about to be updated, but Slaves to Darkness are about to be a thing?
Yeah.
Or does it exist to clear stock because they are about to be updated? And there isn't actually a lot of precedent for the latter. There's loads of precedent for the former. And so I think that the Chaos Warriors kit will probably be left alone. I could be wrong about that.
That's super old, isn't it? Even older than zombies.
No, it's not.
Oh, is it not?
It's not that old. I don't think it's any older than like most of the demon kits that are still in circulation, like the Bloodletters and Pink Horrors and Demonettes.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So I think a lot of the Slaves to Darkness, like traditional Chaos Warrior stuff like the Chariots and Shrine and things, the Demon Prince, Chaos Spawn, all of those kits will probably be left alone because actually a lot of those things hold up. They're about the right size. Like they haven't suffered from scale creep in the way that the other units have because they were always big.
Yeah.
So I suspect they'll be left alone, but because the big part of that faction that was really dated was the barbarians, like the Marauders, the old Norska kind of stuff.
I remember them.
That's the side of it that I suspect is going to get replaced.
So some hero models, a couple of unit boxes. So maybe not like the biggest overhaul. Not like if Moonplan was massive, there are loads and loads of kits. Gloomspite Gitz, sorry. So maybe it feels like this will be like, could be smaller scale.
Well, I would argue probably somewhere between Daughters of Cain and Gloomspite.
So some cool heroes.
Yeah, because Daughters of Cain got like 3 new kits and a hero. So I think it'll be slightly more than that. So that in terms of stuff described in the book and based on the, based on the stuff they've announced, with the sort of the stuff implied by the warband, you'd sort of expect at least a big infantry unit, a bunch of heroes, including wizards, maybe priests, but also things like dog chariots, because they're explicitly mentioned several times in the books.
Right. That makes sense. Maybe some sort of altar or something, maybe a kind of scenery piece that...
Yeah, maybe, I suspect a scenery piece. I think the War Shrine, the Chaos War Shrine kind of stands in for that, and that's still a good kit. Like, there's nothing about that couldn't be, I don't think they necessarily need a new sort of mobile battle church, because they have one. But yeah, so I'm really excited about that stuff, and I think, like, I'm sort of very enthusiastic about moving in a chaos undivided direction with things.
Which you can presumably be able to work in some Tzeentch or Call or whatever.
Oh yeah, well the great thing about Slaves to Darkness, I don't know what they'll do through Allegiance ability, but one of the huge things about Slaves to Darkness is being able to like pick and choose in cool ways from other Chaos factions.
Yeah,
like include them as cameos and things, which is really neat.
That's really nice. Yeah, I love that idea. That's really cool.
Yeah, dead into it. But we're still talking about news, so that's more theory than news. Well, we could talk about the new Underworlds stuff, I suppose.
Yeah,
to some extent.
Might as well.
Godsworn Hunt is the Dark Oath warband, and Molog's Mob is the new Troggoth warband. And I've played with Godsworn Hunt a couple of times, and I played against Molog's Mob, so I can talk about it from that perspective.
Yeah, cool.
Molog's Mob is horrifying, like to the point where I think they're going to be really interesting in how they shake things up. I suspect one thing they've introduced to Underworlds, which I think is a really positive thing, is a ban list and a restricted cards list. So you can only have 5 cards from the restricted card list in your deck total.
Right.
And some cards are simply banned now.
Okay.
And that is necessary. And I think, playing with some friends, it became immediately obvious, like, some things are probably going to end up on one of those 2 lists quite quickly from the new sets.
Yeah.
Particularly when it comes to Molog's Mob, because Molog's Mob changes a lot of things about the game. So the way that warband works is you have Molog the Troggoth, who is far and away the best fighter in Underworlds now. 7 wounds, really easy inspire condition, can relatively easy get to the position where he's doing 6 damage on an attack. In an AoE, he can charge twice in a turn. Like, he's very mobile despite being huge. He has a ranged attack. Like, there's not a lot he can't do. And he's supported by basically sort of tactically sort of useful but not particularly fightily mushrooms, basically.
Yeah. A
flying squig, a stalag mushroom that can be placed wherever you like, and a sort of squig mushroom thing that's always exploding. And those are used very sort of sparingly and mostly to kind of like generate glory points to upgrade Molog.
Right.
When I played against Molog's Mob with Godsworn for the first time, it was funny, but it was the most one-sided Underworlds I have ever seen.
Right.
Like, the way I think about Molog's Mob is, imagine the Iron Jaws warband, but take 80% of the power away from the other 3 and put them all into Gerzak. Because Gerzak's already he's already
the biggest one by a long
The biggest
long way.
one, yeah. Basically, every single turn I lost, every single round I lost 2 or 3 without really any way of avoiding it because there are cards like Inspiration Strikes, which instantly inspire a character, which are of interesting utility in a warband where the power is evenly spread, or relatively evenly spread.
Yeah.
But in Molog's Mob, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Because you instantly inspire Molog and he goes berserk.
Right.
So in my first game, I lost 15-0. And I lost everybody in the second phase.
God.
Like, there was, because with the Dark Oath, who have 6 fighters, there's no reasonable way of staying out of his range, because he has the ability to charge twice, range 2, 3 movement. Like, it's not really possible not to sacrifice somebody. And he one-shots every single person on that team. When he's inspired, he can one-shot anyone, basically, apart from the very rare 5 wound characters. So it's not to say that it's overpowered at all, but it's like, I can imagine it being a really punishing experience for people who aren't specifically prepared for it.
Yeah.
And even I'm not entirely sure how to be specifically prepared for it. Like, I watched a friend who's a very good Underworlds player play with his very competitive tournament winning Tzeentch deck against it and get completely tabled. Like, just because you can't really stop him getting in your face unless you win the roll off to get a long board placement and keep him at arm's length.
Yeah. 3 movement isn't massive, but I guess you can upgrade him and stuff.
He's also range 2.
Oh, right, yeah.
So it's effectively 5.
Yeah.
And so, he's terrifying. Like, it'll be really interesting. Like, the downside to it is if he dies, it's basically game over for that mob. So I think it's a really interesting dynamic. I want to play more with it because it's, it'll be a kind of a fun thing to see how it resolves. I think it'll shake things up a lot because he's so threatening. Like, there's it'll be really interesting to see what can survive.
Yeah.
I imagine things like Fast Riders might be quite good because they can keep him at range 3 and there's not a lot of them. So you can prevent, because he can only get a double charge if he can get the first charge, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The way he works best is like charges into one group of people, kills them, and then charges again and kills them, which is against any warband with lots of models, it's impossible to avoid. because there's not enough space on the board. You know, if I suspect the poor old Sepulchral Guard are completely fucked against him.
I think they already are, but
But yeah,
more
Skaven
so.
as well. Like Skaven, Reavers, Sepulchral Guard, Nighthaunt will all struggle against someone that can chain and combo so hard off a single charge.
Imagine the mirror match.
Yeah.
Two archers very slowly wading towards each other.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And also one of the things is that because of there's the leader card set, which is bonuses specifically for leaders, affect Moloch Mob disproportionately because they are all in on the leader, which means that like, they benefit a lot from cards like if your leader kills somebody, gain a point, which in other warbands might be a bit situational because like Garrick's Reaver is the one I've played the most, for example. Garrick is a bit of a distraction. You power up Sayek or one of the other ones to go do the big heavy lifting for you. So those leader cards are sort of useful, sort of not. Whereas with Moloch's Mob, it's really, a lot of those, powerful cards have a force multiplying effect with him because the entire warband is built around that.
That's rough. I mean, I can think of some cards that freeze characters in place and stuff that might work pretty well against Moloch.
Banned though. Time Trap is
Oh,
banned.
are they really?
So, yeah, so,
okay.
I mean, there are some things like anything that reduces movement, I can imagine being pretty good against him.
Yeah.
Transfixing Stare, I think, is the card, allows you to sort of give a character a move token, even if they haven't moved, which is really good.
That's really good.
It does lock down the double turns. So I think it's more a case of adjusting to it, but it's been the most dramatic, like, oh shit kind of experience I've had with Underworlds.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I imagine you should see more people having to build those sort of cards into their decks in case they face that warband. But then that's always an interesting thing that's happened to the meta is like, is it a tax on everyone because of the way this one warband particularly works? And, you know, does that restrict people's deck building ability competitively if, you know, you just have to have certain cards to deal with Malog?
Yeah, I think I've decided that I'm basically going to try and main Godsworn because I found them really interesting.
Cool.
And I can talk about a little bit why. They're really interesting because they play like a sort of, they're quite a lot like Garrick's Reavers in that they have a really reliable inspire condition, which is they inspire whenever you give any of them an upgrade. So when each individual model gets an upgrade, they inspire. And it's because they're on the path to glory and getting something. Yeah. And this applies to the dog as well. It's 5
Nice.
people in a dog. But they also have, but unlike Garrick's Reavers, they don't have quite the same kind of like scary melee punch that Garrick's Reavers do. But they do have, the speed and range, which means they hold objectives a little bit better. So they play a play style which I think has been underrepresented in Underworlds, which is a sort of like fast objective capture kind of thing where they don't want to sit back in their own territory and farm objectives, but they also kind of, they want to kind of like skirmish into the sort of midfield and kind of play range games and things and then like, all kind of come together for, like killer strikes. Because their damage output is actually really low until you start getting these combos off, and it's actually really gratifying pulling it off.
Yeah.
Like, you can do things like, there's one character who is the owner of the dog, and they have an ability that allows them to call the dog to heal, which allows you can push the dog double its movement characteristic, which is eight hexes, as long as it ends adjacent to its owner. So
awesome.
so the dog doesn't really do much most of the time, but you can do stuff like, you know, use it to set up assists and things, but like calling it into position and blocking hexes. And you can do, I've had loads of fun moments with them because like the threat range can be surprising because they're all movement 4 by default and some of them have range 3 weapons.
Well.
And like the lady with the javelin, which is a really fun model, her javelin does more damage if she throws it when she charges, but she can only throw it once per game. Because she throws it away.
It's not just magically.
Yeah.
That's against the rules of Warhammer.
But her specific upgrade, each of them has like an upgrade that's specifically for them. Her specific upgrade gives her an enchanted javelin, which returns to her hand.
Right.
So she gains that permanently.
Cool.
Which is really rad. But it means that you can do these sort of like, you can set up something and then suddenly have her charge out from the back line and throw a javelin from really far away and like push someone down a hole and stuff. It's really, I really like
cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, it has reminded me how much I like that game, despite getting completely annihilated by the indestructible Troggoth. The Troggoth particularly, like, I remember, Magor's Fiends and the Ironjaws always felt like a really rough matchup for Garrick's Reavers because they rely on snowballing off an early kill. And if you can't kill someone, what you gonna do?
Yeah.
and fighting a Smolog's mob when you hide the mushrooms at the back, so there's no easy glory to get there, and just throw the Troggoth into your face was like that plus, basically, for me with Dark Oath. So I'll be interested to see how that matches up. But yeah, Underworlds is still really good. I really like how that's
It's already inventive, so lots of, new types of warband that are coming out, even if this one is pretty menacing.
Yeah, and I think it shows there's still got I think the ban list and stuff gives them space to design interesting things without having to worry about what the effect of certain cards is going to be on it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think a lot of things they've banned are not just power, it's because of the way they limited the design space. So like in banning Time Trap, they basically banned your ability to take 2 turns in a row without, basically your ability to take 2 turns in a row. And I can understand why they would do that, because the ability to take 2 turns in a row then has to be factored in whenever you're designing any kind of ability.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely a limiting thing.
Interesting.
Elsewhere on the news plate, what else we got? Do you want to talk about, speaking of other boxed games, sort of the stuff that's going on with Blackstone? Because I know you've been working through your Blackstone stuff.
That's been my main hobby project this month, but they did announce an expansion for it, which is the Amble expansion. I'm not sure if it's called that, but it's going to add the Amble, which is a very, very old, like, almost a sort of joke monster. That's
like a rogue trader era.
Yeah, from like way back when, and it's just a random doodle by John Blanche or someone in a random rulebook, became this ridiculous kind of monstrous ant creature.
What if an ogre has an ant's face?
Yeah, exactly. And then suddenly it's back. It's been hiding in the Blackstone Fortress all along, and it's going to get its own big, like, enormous model and special rules. And apparently it's almost like a side quest that can happen within Blackstone Fortress, where you can chase it down or something and find it within the Blackstone Fortress for great rewards.
Kill it, take its stuff?
Yeah. And it's just it's very different from the Warhammer quests they've done previously, where the types of upgrades and additions they've done have been, here's some rules for extra heroes, and here's
for models you might always have.
Yeah, precisely. And here's a box full of some heroes that you already exist. Whereas this is actually a really cool way of broadening what is, a long campaign, something that you could probably insert into the middle of the campaign that you're already running. And I really like that. It's really exciting. I also love that Blackstone Fortress in particular is a way of, we've already discussed, a way of exploring weird corners of the 40k lore, and the Amble is just the weirdest corner of 40k lore. And the idea that that's now going to be a model in that game is really cool, and bodes well. I really hope there's like more of that type of thing planned for Blackstone, because while I'm still working towards it, I want to play it once it's all painted, which is ambitious, but then I'll have to paint an Amble as well, and I'll be very happy to see them releasing more stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the rules are like, I'm not sure like how it actually works.
I think there's a sort of, so there are like structured encounters in Blackstone as well as the kind of randomly generated ones.
Right.
I think it's a new structured encounter, but it also gives you the cards you need to add the Amble as an enemy type that can potentially be encountered.
Oh, fantastic. So you just turn up throughout the game.
I can basically add it to the random encounter table, basically.
Cool. That's really nice. That's
yeah.
Because
it also comes with a bunch of like Gribbly monsters as well. It's not just
right.
the Amble, it's also a bunch of attendant insect kind of pals that live in its house.
Very cool. Very cool.
That game's great. I haven't played it much since we last recorded one of these podcasts. I think I've had one session since, but it remains like my favorite new Warhammer thing in ages.
Really excited to play it. Oh, it's going to be so good. Yep, just moving on to the bad guys. Lots of bad guys to paint.
Yeah. The last Blackstone game we had was Pious Fawn went completely berserk and basically did the entire expedition by herself. It was kind of, I was going to say she's a very hot and cold kind of, well, she's the lady with the flamethrower, if that joke wasn't obvious.
Yeah.
But man, when she goes off, she really, really goes off. Like,
she can flame, she can sort of like suppress.
She can shoot at everybody in a hex. Every model that shares a hex, she can attack all at once. And her instant inspire condition is if she kills 3 people in the same hex, all at once. And there are ways in the game of guaranteeing that once per expedition. So
you can pull enemies.
Yeah. So basically here's a pro tip for the month. How to instantly inspire Pious Fawn. If you run her with, because the pair I've been running, because I've been playing with my friend Will, and we have had 2 heroes each, basically, and I've been running Diet Grek and Pious Fawn, so Flamethrower Lady and Kroot Tracker. She has the ability to, on a, her 6+ weapon action, so if you have an activation dice of a 6, her thing is she can do an attack against every model in a hex. Diek's spaceship has a once per expedition ability that costs, I think it's 2 up for Diet Greg to use it, but 6 up for everyone else to use it. And if you use the 6 up, if you use that, what happens is you do one of your weapon abilities, but rather than rolling dice, every roll is a crit.
Wow.
So, which is usually because he's a sniper, it's for like, it's basically like a targeting array, like a kind of, like targeting matrix kind of zooms in on a particular hex and guarantees crits.
Yeah.
But as written with Pious Fawn, that means all 3 of her attacks become crits automatically, which crits in Blackstone do 3 damage, so they kill almost everything in terms of basic infantry. So guardsmen, ghouls, spindle drones, etc. So the way that game went is I just realized that because of the way initiative swapping works, which is super cool in Blackstone, I could put her at top of the initiative order. Out of the lift and around a corner within her movement range were 3 Urgals standing together in a pile. And so I was just like, I'm just going to do this. And so Diak's spaceship gives her instant crits against all of them. She just kills all of them immediately and that is then inspired for the rest of the expedition. Yeah. But I love my headcanon kind of theming of this is that she doesn't, she is supposed to be this sort of like, ex-hive ganger agent of the sort of, ecclesiastical element of imperial society. Like her name is Pious, for heaven's sake. My sort of headcanon is that she doesn't understand that this targeting data that's being fed to her is like some Xenos kind of like laser targeting system.
It's the will
she
of the
sees
Emperor.
She sees it as like a beam of holy light through the clouds.
That's right.
Like, set these people on fire, Pious. Yes, Dad. It's very good.
I love the idea that those spaceship abilities overlap with other characters' abilities as well.
Yeah.
That kind of team play and interaction within a squad is super cool. I'm really, really looking forward to it. I'm wondering which heroes to run. I quite just place at the halflings. They're not called halflings, ratlings. I might do them. They're really funny.
Yeah, they're really good.
Are they really good? I
think they're all pretty good.
Yeah.
There are characters that become more useful as time goes on as well. Like, I've basically given all of my upgrades to Diak, and he's really good now, but he's really good against single targets. And initially that wasn't that useful because you're facing hordes all the time with the initial encounter deck.
That makes sense.
But now that we've got like beastmen in the encounter deck, you suddenly want someone who's really good at taking down, a big character, because that becomes a bigger threat as time goes on. Like, so early on, you'll probably find that like Pious, the robot, the priest are all really good because they're all naturally good against mobs. But you also want, the Eldar, for example, in reserve. She's really good against sort of highly armored individual targets.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Man, it's cool.
It's really good.
What a good box that is. Seems like it's going to have pretty serious ramifications for the lore as well. Feels as though that Blackstone Fortress, and they've kind of reinvented the Blackstone Fortress a bit, because remember when it was in Battlefield Gothic and it used to be just...
Yeah, it still is.
It still is, yeah. And it is expressly a chaos vessel, as though like, Khorne owns this. Whereas this one is very much, is more ambiguous and
the thing, I don't know how much of a retcon it is, but the idea is that they've always been Xenos constructs.
Okay.
It's just that, because they're made of Blackstone. That's the thing they introduced in Forgebane last year, I think, is the idea that, because you have these sort of pylons that can shut down the Eye of Terror. I think the retcon has been that it's all one material, and it either amps the warp or suppresses it.
So it depends who channels it.
So it's like a kind of, warp manipulation material, basically. So that's why the Blackstone Fortresses are both like a powerful anti-chaos weapon, but also really powerful in the hands of chaos. The fact that they're shaped like a Chaos 8-pointed star, presumably a coincidence.
Yeah, that's the other part with the new art and stuff. Like, they don't show the Blackstone Fortress as being that at all. That's the old Battlefield Gothic conception of what they look like. Whereas this is supposed to be almost like a shapeless, massive, shifting Xenos corridors and strange chambers.
Well, it's like the interior is shifting, but it's still that from the outside.
That type of thing.
It's also like in a huge debris field. Like, and there's, there's a nice bit of lore, which is not a spoiler for the game because it's in the basic lore, but it's like the reason it's full of Black Legion Chaos Space Marines, which is another reason to think that Chaos Undivided stuff is coming this year.
Sure.
But the reason it's full of them is because, it basically ate a Chaos warship from the Battle of Forcadia.
That's where it's from. Cool.
Yeah, like they basically went into the warp after that battle, but it gone wrong because going into the warp goes wrong sometimes, and they ended up basically getting eaten by this Blackstone Fortress.
Yeah.
So that's where all the Chaos Space Marines come from, is
it's
trapped.
was gushing about the art in the last podcast, and actually in the latest White Dwarf, they've just got they've got an Illumination section, and actually Illuminations used to be its own magazine, and it's now being incorporated into New White Dwarf. And it's just beautifully printed, is the reason why you have a magazine rather than looking at a website, just being able to see these beautiful printed pieces of art on a piece of paper in front of you. And they've got loads of the Blackstone artwork, and one of them shows almost like the throne room of the Space Marines, and there are all these shards kind of coming into it. That is the Blackstone Fortress kind of trying to eat it and infiltrating the bridge of their ancient ship. And I found that all that artwork is super evocative, because it's not too detailed, but it just evokes a sense of space and a sense of kind of colour and confusion. And it's super, super good. What a cool setting for a board game.
Yeah, I really like it. Like, yeah, I'll play more of it now. Now I want to play it. Speaking of White Dwarf, actually, it might be worth talking a bit about how White Dwarf's relaunched, because I really like what they've done with it.
I'm super impressed. I think that, like, this issue's my favourite White Dwarf ever, probably, just because they brought back little short stories, and I really like having like little bits of fiction in there. I think that it's lovely they brought that back. It's very segmented into different, there's an AOS section, there's a 40k section, there's like a Adeptus Titanicus section, and they've still got battle reports, but it means that all of their systems are getting like a lot of attention and cool features, and the features I found to be like actually super useful, especially like loads of great painting guides in there, loads of a whole section on the realm of fire and how to paint effects for various types of material and basing and scenery and stuff like that. Just really good practical hobby tips with great photography, and it's just a really good issue, I think.
Yeah, like I think it shows that like I can't approach a magazine like this neutrally now, because I worked on a magazine for a long time. Yeah. And, and actually I've always, there's a not insubstantial amount of sort of crossover in kind of personnel between PC Gamer and Games Workshop over the years. Yeah. Right. Like it has definitely happened, and that sort of, it feels like, there's always been a sort of, PC Gamer magazine specifically that's actually quite a lot like White Dwarf in some ways, like in terms of the way, talking about play rather than rules necessarily. Like battle reports are very,
PCG reports, diaries, that kind of thing.
Sure. But this, and I was subscribed to White Dwarf when it came back, a couple of years ago, and I subscribed for about a year, and then I let it lapse for a few reasons. One was because it felt like it was recycling the same sorts of features over and over again. Like the painting guides were too specific, really, and not broad ranging enough. But also because one thing that's really different between White Dwarf and PC Gamer is how far in advance White Dwarf is written. Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? I always found that very off-putting. And I don't know if this is something you think about when you've worked in that environment, but like, their inability to be very reactive to the community or what was going on really showed, because, and I think this is still the case, because like there are references in the new it's really clear from the reader letters in the current issue of White Dwarf that it was written in the middle of last year. It's from like June, July, August last year. Lead time. It is a huge lead time. So for clarity, if you're not aware, PC Gamer is produced with about a 2 to 3 week lead time, which means that when it goes on shelves, is about 2 to 3 weeks after it was sent to the printers. Yep. And that's, about as tight as it can possibly get in the world of magazines. A lot of magazines, even sister magazines, are produced with a much longer lead time than that. White Dwarf was at a very long lead time. And on paper, I understand why, because they are literally sitting at the source of all the information they'll ever need. They don't need to, be reactive to what a game publisher might do, because they are the publisher as well. Yes. But it really makes it feel a bit dead if it's miles out of touch with what's going on in the community at that time. Like it would prevent them from ever doing like, let's check in with this cool tournament that happened this month, because you'll find out about it in 6 months. And that's, I remember the previous White Dwarf that really put me off was one where it was like a Christmas issue. But there was a lot of sort of tongue-in-cheek references to the fact that it was being written in July. Or August. And I was like, I get that you can't get around this, but it was also like,
don't hang a lantern on it.
Yeah, don't hang Whereas the new one, I don't know what the restructuring's necessarily been, but it's much more substantially written by the design team. So far more of the articles are by people working on the games in the present tense.
Yeah, that's true.
And that, I think, is the key to why it's gotten so much better so quickly, is because suddenly it's sort of very much from the horse's mouth kind of insight. And therefore it matters less that it's being written miles in advance because if you've not gotten closer to the present day, you've gotten a lot closer to the source, rather than it being a mag team translating stuff that will also go out through various other marketing channels so far ahead of time that it feels a bit stifled by the time it gets to you.
Yeah, they say in the intro, in fact, they've moved the White Dwarf kind of desks or whatever the setup is, like they sit with the design team now. So they could just go over and ask someone if they want to, presumably just ask if they want to pen something.
Yeah.
And that definitely shows. So I liked the access to Golden Demon painters, and I found a lot of that, like a bunch of that stuff really insightful they've always done very good Golden Demon coverage. And
I agree with that, yeah.
The great photography that really feeds into that. I think one of the big differences between White Dwarf and Gamer is that, there's so much photography in White Dwarf, and that is really time consuming and just...
Yeah, totally.
And also, especially if they're part of the publisher that is also producing the product, there's also that onus to show them all in their best light.
Oh, yeah.
But that's also why the White Dwarf team is so much bigger than Gamer's team these days in particular, because they have got to have like 2 photographers doing stuff and so much kind of time and stuff to produce.
Oh, yeah, I don't mean to sound like I don't understand the lead time.
Sure.
But I do think the lead time is detrimental to the product.
Yeah.
Like, it might be unavoidable from a production point of view, but I don't think until recently, I don't think White Dwarf was making up for the difference. You know what I mean? Like, you have to accept that you got a certain lead time, but then you got to try and pay it back to the reader in some way.
Yeah.
And I feel like that wasn't really the case, but this new issue really impressed me because of the amount of new stuff in it. The idea of using it as a way to put out new skirmish rules, which we're going to get to later in this episode.
Yes, yeah.
To put out chapter rules for Space Marines and things like that. Like, it feels so much more close to the sort of marrow of the hobby than it did.
Because so John Bracken wrote the skirmish rules, and they're doing much better at like creating recognisable figures within the Warhammer team who are kind of public facing. And John Bracken's one of those people because he runs a lot of their tournament stuff. Yeah, he's like one of their TO organisers, tournament organisers, as I just said. And so he's created loads of rules for that sort of stuff. But it's cool to see him doing rules writing in White Dwarf as well, and his recognisable face. And yeah, the more of that sort of thing they do, but like. So a way of building a community when you do have a long lead time is to create recognisable figures who are on Twitch streams and on the internet and being public faces of the company. That's changed a lot.
And it's also I think the other way of doing it, which is what they are doing. And so I would say I have resubscribed on the strength of this one issue because I really like it. The other thing I think they're doing well is providing like features that have long-term value. And so, it might, it's definitely a kind of get you to come back kind of plan that the skirmish stuff for AOS is going to be spread over several months in the magazine. That's not necessarily a new trick, but that stuff has value, like has long-term value, whereas the old style sort of let's get design insights on the latest release for 40k or Age of Sigmar is interesting, but it's not the kind of thing I'm going to hold on to. You know what I mean? Like in terms of I want to go back to this. Yeah. So one of the reasons the Golden Demon stuff was always so good is like I basically kept that entire pile of magazines because I like looking back over the painting stuff.
Yes.
And I think the more they can do to fill that magazine with features that you'll want to return to because they address something sort of timeless about the hobby, whether it's how to paint Realm of Fire, which I agree that article's great, or like even the Jervis Johnson article, which is simply about how FAQs are done.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's like, and again, it has sort of lasting value. And I think that's the way to overcome a long lead time. Like there's definitely some sort of, it's not this stuff can ever be objectively plotted, but if you were to try and objectively plot it, lead time has a relationship with timelessness of content. Like you can have a long lead time if you're producing stuff that is very evergreen and it doesn't age quickly. But White Dwarf has always had a problem traditionally with the fact that in the last couple of years it's been competing with the web. So, here is a big, one of the reasons I stopped getting it was because it would be like, here is a huge series of articles talking about Iden F. Deepkin models that I have seen in 4 other contexts and have come out, And
often the same photography as well, which is, again, repeating the content a bit. This is a perennial problem with magazines face anyway. To what extent do you undermine the magazine by putting things online, etc.? And White Dwarf faces the same issue.
Oh god, we've journeyed to the centre of the baseball, Tom.
Yeah, we are, for sure. But for me, the best things that have ever come out of White Dwarf are A, painting stuff, and B, White Dwarf acting as a kind of quiet expansion to all the existing games.
Yeah, totally.
In the other White Dwarf issue that I would compete with this one for me is one where they had, they printed pirate rules for a pirate warband for wartime. In my next Warhammer campaign, I've held on to that White Dwarf forever because I was one day I'm going to make this. And the rules are super fun. You could have, when you lost limbs, you could replace them with peg legs and stuff. You could have like a parrot that had rules that would, attack enemies and stuff like that. And I ran the pirates in my next Wartime campaign, and they were dreadful, but it was the funniest battles I've ever had in Warhammer was with those rules. And if I hadn't picked up that issue of White Dwarf, I'd never have even had that as an option.
Yeah.
And so it's a quietly just expanding all aspects of the hobby and stuff that you want to hang on to and use in your future games. And this with the Realm of Fire painting tips and with the skirmish rules and with the Crimson Fists chapter.
Oh god, they really got you with that, right?
Oh yeah, that's laser targeted at my interests. So, that felt right on the money, I think. But I think I'm going to kind of pick up issues, one by one for a while, just to see if that kind of keeps up. Cause I know a relaunch can be a big thing and a lot of effort can go into it. And then maybe the grind of it can, hurt further down the line, but we'll see.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of support, because I actually really enjoyed being subscribed, because I think the thing I like about the hobby stuff generally for me is it's sort of like, it's a genuine break from work. Whereas I guess you and I are in the relatively unique position of working in video games where hobby work overlaps.
Lots of crossover.
Yeah.
The Venn diagrams.
And so like every month getting this sort of magazine that was just a big sort of like pile of things I was interested in, I really, really liked. And it took a while before that kind of, fatigue set in. And the new formula has really revitalized it for me. So I'm kind of happy to subscribe, because now I'm excited to see sort of everything that's in it again, particularly, as you say, now that it feels like more of like a direct line to the creators of this thing I like every month. I'm really excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, good job. People who make that magazine.
Yeah, good job, guys.
Good job, guys.
Yeah. And I appreciate, if you're not interested in publishing and things, this might have been a bit of a weird digression, but it is a big part of the hobby, how they choose to communicate.
Absolutely. I think it's also a big part of people's memories of Warhammer as well. White Dwarf has always been important. Like, I remember a load of those old covers and all the old artwork and stuff. And, it has always been an important part of their business, I think. It's resurrected.
Yeah. And it's really great to see it evolve. And it's great to see it evolve without as far as I could tell, without too much external pressure to change. It felt like it changed because it needed to, not because...
everything they've done has made it more like old White Dwarf. Like, remember when they went down to like, fortnightly issues and they're like really thin.
It was a product catalogue basically.
And they separated out Illuminations into a different thing that wasn't really worth the money. And it's like, oh no, just bring it back into a very hefty, chunky, really nice kind of hobby magazine. That's lovely. It's a nice thing to own.
It's good stuff. I'm trying to think what else we've got on the news list. It's a big old news list.
What's happened?
While we're still on AOS stuff, I want to talk about Carrion Empire. This is also announced. I didn't realize I also wanted this.
So this is Flesh Eater Cults versus Skaven.
Specifically Clan Skyer.
Right.
Which I'm dead into.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was talking to a friend of the podcast and a friend of us, Chimp, and who owns a Flesh Eater Cults army. And as soon as this happened, he was like, is there a battle time? Is there a battle time? Is there a battle time? Is it coming? Is it coming? Is it coming? And if they did do like a Flesh Eater Cults battle time, would that be the first of like the new battle tomes they've refreshed within this cycle?
I don't. So there's definitely precedent for this sort of structure. So I think, we've just had Wrath and Rapture, which is the Khorne Demons versus Slanesh Demons army box, new models in both. Yeah. But also old models. Slanesh is obviously coming at some point, right?
Yeah.
This box I think is really interesting because it has a new Flesh Eater Cults character model and a new Skaven character model.
Yeah.
Both of those factions are really interesting because both of them need both battle tome and model support, but for completely different reasons. Flesh Eater Cults need it because their battle tome is out of date. But also because they have a relatively small number of kits. It's like 3 kits total for Flesh Eater Cults. It's like ghouls, the crypt ghouls kind of multi-part.
Flayers. There are a few that build different ways.
Yeah, the crypt ghouls, crypt flayers, I think is one kit.
And you've got like Terrorgeist and stuff.
And the Terrorgeist, Ghoul King on Dragon or not on Dragon.
Variations
right,
of those themes.
But it's not loads. Basically, like almost every kit that exists for that faction is in the stock collecting box. Put it that way. So they do need new kits, but they could use a rules update. So I think a battle tome for them is not kind of like out of the question because the requirements for it are relatively easy to imagine. I think also like they're an ideal candidate for like a couple of new models and a piece of terrain.
Right.
You know,
Just not a huge model update, but like a nice rules update that.
and a couple of new kits and a battle tome.
Because they arrived after, they were one of the AOS books, weren't they?
Yeah.
And I think it might be the first AOS book that would get a refresh with a new book, apart from Stormcast. And it would be interesting to choose Special as opposed to Caradron or
the room is that Caradron are coming, but also Caradron are much newer.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, you know, there are also things like Bone Splitters that could also use the same treatment, that kind of thing.
I enjoy it as well, to be honest.
Skaven are a really interesting case because, and I'm a big Skaven fan, but they've been a weird place for a long time because they are one of the most iconic and popular Warhammer factions, yet their kits are in complete disarray. You know, there's only been one sort of Skaven battle tome for AOS and it's Clan Pestilence. And the reason for that, I have to assume, is because only Clan Pestilence has a consistent standard of plastic kits. So if you take like Clan Skyer, which is the kind of tech Skaven, like the kind of war machines and storm fiends and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
There are some relatively new plastic kits like Storm Fiends, the Warp Lightning Cannon, that kind of stuff. But their battle line, so Storm Fiends are battle line for Clan Skyer, but so are Skyer Acolytes. And Skyer Acolytes and Globadiers and things are only available as metal resin miniatures for like £8 each. Like, they're just unviable. Like, they're in that proper old school Warhammer Fantasy Battle dead zone, which is really weird for one of the most popular factions. And, you know, there are bizarre rules problems for Skaven, like the fact that clan rats aren't battle line for any clan other than Verminus, I think.
Right.
Which is nuts. Because they're called clan rats.
They're divided on weird lines as well, aren't they? Like the Skyer.
It's Skyer, Mulder, Verminus, Pestilence, Master Clan. But Master Clan shouldn't really be a clan by itself because it's the clan that sits on top of the clan. So you know what I mean? There's like, the whole thing needs a proper Legions of Nagash style rewrite.
That would be the parallel I would draw for sure. Legions of Nagash. And some, you can imagine though, I'd want to see like a massive models release with Skaven because I think I'd love to see what they do with like the Doom Bell.
I don't think we'll get a new bell because the Screaming Bell is like one of the plastic kits that's still.
Oh, is that like an End Times one perhaps?
Yeah, it's relatively new because it's with the Pestilence set because I think it's the same kit that makes the. Oh no, it's not.
Screaming Bell, sorry.
Screaming Bell.
Maybe Doom Wheel. I'm not sure.
Doom Wheel's still good as well.
Yeah,
because if you, but this is what was so striking to me because what's in Carrion Empire is you get a Doom Wheel, you get Skaven, you get the Lightning Cannon, you get Storm Fiends and one character. It's actually a minimum model count elite Skaven army.
Yeah.
Because those are the only plastic kits that are still good.
Yeah.
I suspect, you know, if any other old Warhammer factions are about to get the same treatment that Night Goblins just got, it's probably Skaven because they're in a very similar position to where Night Goblins were. Like Night Goblins are the equivalent, right? Like they had a few decent plastic kits, but a lot of old resin things like Fanatics and things about as important to the fiction. But also like the other thing that's worth pointing out is that, you know, if you think about how far, because the Games Workshop is at times working 5 years ahead, you know, there were weird little unprecedented spider goblins in Silver Tower 3 years ago. And it took 3 years to get to the point where that suddenly blows up into this huge faction release.
Yeah.
But also in Silver Tower was a Dark Oath character, but also 2 new Skaven Eshin assassins.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Like, that came out of basically nowhere. Like Heroes 2 Death Runners that we've never really been seen other times. Then a couple of years after that, you get the Skaven Warband for Underworlds, which establishes a whole bunch of new Skaven design. Like, we know this about Games Workshop, that this stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. And those designs, once they're in the CAD system, aren't that's not happening for one Underworlds Warband. I put it that way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, more hairless Skavens come. I like the Skaven, but Eshin is my favourite, Skaven sub-faction, I think. I love the idea of like lots of grey-robed master assassins kind of running around on the battlefield, acting almost as like fanatics or something, which is they could pop out of a unit and assassinate something.
I really wanted Skyer as allies for Tzeentch. Like the idea that you have these sort of like Skaven inventors, like trying to science their way through the magic stuff that's happening around them. I really like the idea.
That's a really cool idea. Yeah.
So yeah, like I may well get Carrion Empire, I think, partly because I said I wasn't sure about doing loads more AOS stuff, but I've now bought tickets to go to London GT in September.
Oh, sweet.
But I'm also going to do the doubles, and I'm going to do the doubles with my friend Matt Sherritt of Hipster Hammer.
Yeah.
Who's going to be running Nighthaunt. So if I end up getting a Carrion Empire or two, I may end up running Flesh Eater Cults as a sort of 800 points kind of accompaniment. May not, but we'll see how that goes. But yeah, so that box is looking kind of appealing.
Very cool. Flesh Eater Cults are really cool. Like, I really like their fiction as well.
They're my favourite death faction. I don't really like any of the death factions because vampires aren't really doable, but Flesh Eater Cults are basically vampires.
They basically are, yeah, it's true.
In speaking of weirdos, which we're all speaking about, I think it's probably the last thing on the list of loads of news, but I've been really impressed by the Genestealer Cults stuff.
Let's talk about the bikes. I really like the bikes.
They're really good.
I like the bikes a lot. I think this is where, like, there are two factions I would collect in 40k. First one is Mechanicus, and second, and rising, is Genestealer Cults. Because for me, they embody like a particular, like a really quite an old school, almost like 80s sci-fi aesthetic. And I think that would be super fun to paint. And they're also, I love the idea of like shambolic, just ordinary modern-day motorbikes that are ridden by these kind of weirdos. And one of them is in the Canada Akira sniper pose.
She as well.
Oh, right.
Rad,
yeah. That model is rad. And also just like, just do Akira with a bike. just do that pose. It's awesome. And I want to paint that as well. And I love those models. I think they're really, really cool.
Yeah, they did a really good job. And I think, I really like how sort of much more diverse that setting is becoming as they invest in these kinds of factions specifically.
Yeah.
Like, I'd really love to see where that goes next.
It's that kind of slightly hive aesthetic as well, isn't it? Is that, the idea is that these cults emerge from imperial society, so they sort of addressed a lo-fi way that they're not space marines, they're not huge, they're just cool, weird, just people from those cities that have come up and decided to embrace the
Sometimes your granddad's a Genestealer and there's nothing you can do about it,
Absolutely.
Like, yeah.
It's also they've made a fashion choice as teens to become mods or rockers, except this one comes with extra tentacles further down the line.
Yeah, indeed, yeah.
Extra teeth.
Man, they'd make someone should make this is a bit off topic, but someone should make a 40k Far Cry game.
Right.
Because Genestealer Cults are like the perfect villain for that. Right? Sort of like, cultist, but desperately wrong in some kind of much deeper way. Yeah, they're really good.
Yeah, and also it's such a classic kind of grimdark 40k thing that their religion will ultimately get them liquefied by, their grand ascension will be liquefied into biomass and then eaten by a giant monster.
There was a sort of, but, and that's a really, I really like the way that fits into 40k fiction because there's a whole sort of repeated motif in 40k, messy as that fiction is, that there's probably a lot of people on the ground on these sort of infinite worlds of the Imperium looking to the stars for salvation, and literally nothing that comes from space is ever good. It's like a really good, uniform kind of...
Nothing won't screw them over.
Yeah, exactly.
There's nothing they could latch onto that would help them.
The Genestealer Cults are looking to the sky and waiting for the day that the Tyranid hive fleets arrive and eat everybody. But actually, it's no better to be a imperial, a devout sort of cult of the emperor, sort of Imperium citizen who looks to the sky waiting for the Inquisition to arrive or the Adeptus Astartes or something, because they are just as likely to exterminate the hell out of your planet.
Sure.
So, it's kind of like the whole idea that, it's that subversion of, literally nothing good comes from looking to space for answers. It's one of the things I like the most about the 40k setting, I think, that it's just crap. It's, we're all in the gutter and some of us are looking at the stars, but it doesn't matter because the stars are just a bigger gutter full of assholes.
They'll do much worse things to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no salvation. There's no salvation for the ordinary hive gang, really. They can live a scrappy, horrible life and get shot in an encounter, or they can join in a cult and get eaten by a Tyranids, or they can join, the Imperial Guard and get eaten / shot by a Space Marine or any given creature in the universe they happen to be forced to fight.
Yeah. Or, if probably the best fate you could hope for is to be selected to become a Space Marine, at which point you have your entire personality ripped out. You become a British character actor.
You become Mark Strong.
Yeah, exactly.
And you lose all of your beliefs and you're indoctrinated to.
But you probably live a bit longer.
Probably live a bit longer, for sure. Maybe the best thing to be is, some sort of, really hedonistic, slightly corrupt, but not too corrupt to be noticed by the Inquisition, mid-level kind of
Imperial bureaucrat.
Yes, Imperial bureaucrat in a very, very large city. And you sort of like try your best to just hustle your way through to a natural death without an averse or assassin coming to horribly brain muddy
yeah.
along the way.
In many ways, it is all about the middle class, isn't it? That's the battleground for the soul of humanity.
And maybe that's the best life in 40k. But yeah, anyone listening has any ideas? Send us an email.
Please do let us know. Yeah. It's probably not becoming a Genestealer cultist.
No, I imagine it would be fun for a while. I think the camaraderie would be excellent. And the fact that, it's a bit like Chaos Boons, isn't it? Like everyone starts genetically changing into these creatures and they retain
you change back out. That's the weird thing. Because it's like the Genestealer cult cycle is like granddad's a Genestealer. First generation are very much Genestealers, but a little bit human. Then they become more and more human until like fourth generation is like almost, apart from the fact that they're bald, like are almost, fourth generation is just all Michael Stipe.
Right. Yeah.
And then after Michael Stipe, it's Xenomorphs again.
And then it's, interesting. Is this like children generation by generation going down? Okay.
So yeah, cause there's actually this has been around for a while, but there's a post on Warhammer community this week about exactly this. But yeah, so it's fourth generation is the one where they all pass as human, basically.
Right.
And they're all connected to that original patriarch or, Genestealer ancestor, but then when they have kids, their kids are pure strange Genestealers. They're 100% Tyranid. They're not human at all.
Oh god.
So.
Is that the invasion phase?
Yeah. That's either the invasion phase or those kids get packed off into shipping containers and sent to other planets. And the cycle begins again.
Yeah.
It's the circle of life.
Circle of horrible, fucking futile death.
Yeah.
Good.
But I really like that as again, because I think Tyranids, it's not really an accident where Tyranids come from. Tyranids come from the movie Alien, if you were wondering. And it's a nice sort of reworking of that rather than it being like literally this alien has burst out of your sternum, it's like this alien bursts out of your great-great-grandchild and they like it.
And that's great. You must get special powers and extra strength and extra kind of.
They do, yeah.
So,
but like, and there can be mutants at any given stage that like have an extra arm and things. But the idea is that they're all useful. So the ones that can't pass for human because they are full on Genestealers are used to like dig the tunnels and set up the ambush and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas the ones that pass for human take up positions in government.
Such a good idea, isn't it?
Yeah, and and take over Imperial Guard regiments, which is why they can have cult and things. There's some really cool mechanics with the new Genestealer cult stuff. Like you can set up underground, which is like a traditional deep striking mechanic, but you can also set up in ambush, which is you rather than placing the model, you place a cardboard token that comes with the codex, which just represents a sensor blip. So rather than deploying your actual units, you just deploy sensor blips around the enemy.
Oh, nice.
And there are stratagems that allow you to place 3 sensor blips rather than 1, that kind of thing. So the idea is your enemy is just seeing beeps on the long range scanners.
So that's very space.
And then in your first turn, you replace each blip with a unit. So you decide what was where. And this can be everything from like units of Genestealer cultists to like tanks. So like,
fantastic.
You had a lemon Russ underneath a tarp, basically like.
Yeah.
That's a really cool idea.
That's really cool.
It's basically just the evil A-team. Crossed with the biker mice from Mars.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. Such good models.
Yeah, I like them a lot. We should talk about our own month in hobby stuff, Tom. What have you been up to?
So I've been painting Blackstone Fortress still. That's my main project. And I don't really want to do anything else until all of Blackstone is finished. But Blackstone's a big and varied box, and that's what I'm loving about it. So I've done, some more heroes from the last time. I can't remember which ones I talked about. I've definitely done the Ratlings since then.
Yeah, I think that's new.
And that's new. And they are basically slightly larger than a 5 pence piece. And they are the smallest models I've ever painted, I think, ever. And they're just rich with tiny amounts of detail, little armor plating, stuff dangling off their belts, little goggles on their bald heads, their beards and all that sort of stuff. And luckily I have a magnifier now. It's like a clamp on desk, just massive magnifying glass that I can like bring in. And for these models, it proved to be hugely useful just to be able to see the detail, but also just to get that extra brush control and, you know, actually be able to paint those and separate out the different sections of armor and different colors I wanted to use. And the colors are pretty basic, just sort of various kind of camo shade greens and that kind of thing. But it was very satisfying to paint such little guys, and when you look at them from tabletop, they look awesome. Like they're really, really nice. And, all of the colors like well designed and, not just sort of the coverage is really nice, and it's just turned out really nicely for those models. And I would put that down to be able to see what I'm doing properly on a very, very small scale. And I found it really useful, not all, like 100% of the time, but just like probably about 30% of the time, bringing a magnifier in to go and do a belt buckle or do some eyes or do a moustache or something like that. And the extra visibility I found super, super useful. And I did, the Rogue Trader himself, what's his name?
Janus Drake. And I basically just wanted to go for, I've been following the colour schemes pretty much from the box and from, you know, as they were designed by the heavy metal painters. And, so I did him, and he basically turns out like, looks more or less like the box. Like it looks, I got to a stage where, tabletop level, like, that basically looks that's
like,
him. Yeah.
That's him. That's basically what they did, what heavy metal did. And obviously there's loads of extra detail and technique that goes into heavy metal stuff. But the fact that I was able to get to that level with help of a magnifier and a very good tutorial video from Warhammer TV and the right colours and stuff was actually really, really satisfying. And I've really enjoyed lavishing loads of detail and time on these individual hero models. And having done them, I've got a few left. I've got 3 left. I've got the flamethrower, Pius. I've got Pius to do, and I've got the priest to do, but I'm not sure I'll probably use the priest in the game. I don't think anyone, like, again, as I said last time, not my favourite kind of model in that set. And what's the other one I've got?
The Eldar?
Yeah, the Eldar. And part of the reason I haven't done the Eldar is A, because the pose is a bit weird, especially the leg lengths and a lot of the kind of...
I really like that pose, but only as soon as I figured out what it reminded me of.
What does it remind
Have you ever watched RuPaul's Drag Race?
No, I haven't.
Okay, you should, because it's fun. But also, so when someone does a runway walk, runway, like sort of catwalk kind of show off of a look on RuPaul's Drag Race, they walk on from stage left, turn, do a pose, and then walk forwards, do their bit, and then walk backwards, do a pose, and leave again.
Yeah.
And the Eldari Ranger from Blackstone Fortress is doing the pose a lot of people do, a lot of drag queens do, when they're about to either enter or leave the catwalk. Like a sort of like, and suddenly pose, like wide stance, arm up, you know, hand on hip, and then gone. So it is that moment captured, and that seems very appropriate to me. For
for Eldar.
Yeah, exactly.
My problem with it is actually their left leg, which seems like crushed into, like, it's very weird. The right leg is very extended. And curved. And if you actually trace the shin bone through it, it's like, well, you've got a curved shin bone here. It's a very strange kind of, limb. But the other limb is also just like crushed into the cape. And if you actually straighten them both out, it feels as though the left limb would be like about 75% the length of the right limb. And that for me just breaks the entire pose. I don't mind the kind of the showiness of that. It's just always the stance just like looks really wrong to me. Also, as I was assembling it, I managed to snap the sniper rifle exactly halfway up.
Oh no.
Yeah, so it's the smallest possible, like, area for gluing that thing back on. So that's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, that can be really gutting as well.
That's going to be, it's going to be very difficult to fix that one. It's probably going to end up just being like super glue, and be very careful with it. I think, you know, it's still usable, but, those two things have kind of like, probably won't use that model now just because, you know, I could do like the other ones more, and also this thing might break at any second. But now I'm about to move on to the bad guys. I've done the ghouls, which are really, really fun to paint. You just dry brush those, and they've got like really exaggerated musculature that just like dry brushes beautifully. And then do just some nice kind of, purple glaze on the arms, and some just light dry brushing to create the blending effect. Got one of them holding a skull, put some like blood from the blood god on them, just like,
nice.
kind of, like mess them up a little bit, try and make them a little bit different. But they don't need much doing to them. They're just like a lovely, fun thing to paint. So I'll do the spindle drones next there. Again, just another fun dry brush job.
They're very much dry brush job, yeah.
For sure. So I just need to get them chaos black on them and then go up from black, probably with various kind of greys and things, until they look right. And then I'm going to go on to the Imperial Guard squad, because they're sort of the first foes that you face, and you're going to be regularly fighting them in,
You fight a lot of First Traitor Guard.
So they've got to be done for me. Like they're like, I could put off some of the high level guys and play a few games knowing that the Space Marines probably aren't going to turn up for
They literally can't.
Yeah. So they're just rules wise, you've got to get to a certain level before they bother with you. But I want the guard done, and actually that's going to be a challenge because there are no painting guides anywhere I can find across like Games Workshop's output to actually know how to do them. I can intuit a lot of it. A lot of it's just black and greys and Thundercourt blues and stuff like that. But leather, various tones of leather and stuff like that is something I've never been terribly good at, especially in a kind of more of a military context where like camo or like camo-ish colours. I'm not used to painting those colours, so I need to figure out some formulas and some kind of approaches to it.
I think my approach to them, because I had them on next on the table before I sort of started taking a different tack with painting, but there's a lot of different materials on those models, but every material on those models will probably take an Agrax wash. So like from the metals to the various kinds of leathers. So, my plan is to do them very similar to my Dark Oath stuff. So, maybe basing the darker leathers in something like Skaven Blight Dinge, which is like a slightly brownish dark grey. Yeah. But also using like Xandri Dust for the yellower leathers, which, also takes Agrax really well. And then with like a single highlight, like they don't need loads of, because there's a lot of different materials on them. It's more like the proportion shifts. The base coating time is going to be longer because there's more different materials to cover up.
Yes.
So like, I would say Abaddon Black, Skaven Blight Dinge, Xandri Dust, Corn Red, like a few other, and then Lead Vulture obviously for the metal bits. But when all of that's done, and then obviously whatever skin tones you want to do, when all of that's done, an Agrax wash will cover most of it to the point where it's almost done. Yeah. Like you then don't need to do like 2 highlights on every material, right? Because there are so many materials that they'll break up your sort of visual sense of the model regardless. Yeah. Like you need more highlights when there are fewer different materials on a model. So there's less sort of visual interest.
You don't want to create too much like mess almost. Like too much.
You could spend loads of time on them. Yeah. But like, for those like, the way I found handy for doing leather is, like a base coat that's like the medium tone, then a wash, then a dry brush, because that creates a scratchy effect, and then like a proper edge highlight of a slightly lighter color, and that's basically done. Like you maybe not done to the extent that you would want for a hero, but for them that'll be absolutely fine. Yeah, like you could even stop at the dry brush phase probably.
Yeah, that's useful. I just need to figure out some colors that go well together. And also because they're actually 2 units of 7 really.
Yeah, there are 2 units of 7.
So I want to paint the duplicates differently so that they aren't obviously exactly the same.
My plan is to swap the dark grey and the yellow. Okay. So one of them has dark grey trousers, the other one has
that works. That'll work.
That kind of thing. Like that's pick 2 base colours and swap them.
Cool. Yeah, so that's been my stuff this month. I've not really painted much else, to be honest, but that's a lovely project to be getting on with. Yeah. But I think you've been doing some cool, Chris.
I done quite a bit this month. Like, so basically so after the last time we recorded, I decided to sort of like try and tackle my backlog kind of head on. So I made a spreadsheet, like listing literally everything. Oh, cool. Got rid of some stuff. I think maybe I had done this before we recorded. I'm not sure exactly where it fell. And a few things happened that have helped me kind of just get through more stuff. So I ended up, getting some of those big sort of paint storage boxes, the new ones. And I find them really useful, partly because I wasn't storing my paints in a particularly organized way, but also they come with these sort of, they're divided into sort of trays, basically, the sort of these hex grids, which you plug paints into. And I found myself building like a hex grid for a given project and trying to challenge myself to like fit an entire unit's worth of colors onto a single grid of paints. So that I don't want to paint that thing. I just take that grid out and do that. So I did that for my Rohan stuff, for example, that I've been working on. Yeah. So sort of organizing my time in a different way has been really, really helpful. But the other thing that's been really helpful is a slight change in attitude where I am no longer tremendously worried about having a backlog as long as I'm constantly painting stuff. So I don't really want to think about finishing units or finishing armies or being done with this particular hot project so much as I just kind of want to be constantly painting stuff that I'm enjoying. And so I basically spent the month just doing something and then doing something else and like jumping around my backlog in a way that maybe doesn't make any sense, but has meant that I've like consistently produced stuff I like this month. Whereas normally I might spend a month doing steps on a massive task. Like last year when I spent 6 months painting Zangor.
Yeah.
And so this month in January, I painted 7, more Rohan, sort of warriors, Rohan foot soldiers for the Lord of the Rings battle game, as well as 3 horses and 1 complete rider of Rohan, which I've been doing for a Middle-earth Battle Companies game. And we should talk about Middle-earth game at some point. I'd like to play it with you because you really like it. But I've been playing that a little bit and really enjoying it. And really enjoying painting those models, really enjoying painting something a little bit more lo-fi.
Yeah, I was, sorry to interrupt, but like, I was really curious about the scale and how that really changes your approach to models, how it feels different.
It's so, it's been a really interesting thing because they are smaller. They are a lot smaller. That's a good beer crack. That was a loud but good beer cracking sound.
No good time to do it.
No, but actually that's been really useful learning. So I am slowly learning when you can stop doing things. Like my problem with painting quickly and with painting generally, I think, has been traditionally finding really complicated ways of doing things. And I think in picking Tzeentch as my first like big army project, I gave myself that problem because it's full of materials that could all definitely use a bit more time. You know, like that just invites time investment. But with the Rohan stuff I've been doing, because it's sort of simple materials, there's a point where it's done.
Yeah. And
also they take, Agrax washes really well. So I think I maybe talked about this in the last episode, but my approach has been to simply, like, I wrote down my stages and I base coat everything. I wash them with Agrax and then I have a sort of 2-stage shading and highlighting process for those models. And it works really nicely. And the scale difference actually helps a lot because you get, because they're smaller, the details you do manage to put in feel more impressive, but then not that much harder to implement. And it also means that the models are shorter on fiddly details that require you to make exceptions to your paint scheme. Okay. Or like suddenly do a different technique or something.
Yeah.
Like the downside to that is that sometimes the sculpts can be a little bit dodgy and sometimes you've literally got to paint the detail onto it. But I actually find that easier than suddenly going to trying to figure out how do I paint this sack that's hanging from this person's belt in a way that stands out without breaking the color scheme. Like it asks fewer questions of you. Like I know, you know, when I write my painting guides for myself, I write them in terms of materials, like cloth is this color, or the A variant is this color and the B variant is this color. And that is harder and harder to do with new Games Workshop models generally because they're so covered in exceptions, whereas the smaller Lord of the Rings stuff look really good when they're just coherent with each other. And then you can make small differences like hair color, things like that. But you don't need them to be massive differences because there's so many of them and they're much more like game pieces.
It's really interesting. Like maybe the pressure to design larger models means that the designers want to fill that space with jewels and bags and bits. Just as a way of also almost justifying the size of the model. And it's hard to make a large model that is just dressed in robes with nothing on them because you feel as though instinctively you had to have more on there. And that almost also people appreciate that extra detail because it's a sign of the scale of the designer and the molding process involved. Whereas maybe in those smaller spaces, you can only do so much and you're almost just trying to get the fantasy across as simply as possible in that space. And
I really like how that stuff all looks when they're all together now.
Yeah, they look great.
Because they reward kind of looking at them closely, but also, you know, they are evocative at a distance because, you know, you got just enough highlight on there to kind of, you know,
make the right things pop.
Yeah, make the right things pop, but you don't have to worry about it beyond that. Yeah. So after doing them, I then painted a Necron crypt deck.
Ooh.
Because why not?
Yeah.
Because it's been on I love the model. It's been on my pile for a while. I love Necrons. I've discovered, like, I'm not afraid to say it. And this is this point where I admit that after the resolutions I made in the previous episode, I also bought the Necron Battle Force, Tom.
No, did you?
Yeah. I went mad. But no, it was partly because it was like, I realized this month, like the good thing about this approach to taking this month is I realized the stuff I really enjoy painting. And I really like doing the Necron stuff as well, because there are parts of it that feel so easy they'd like cheating, like lead belcher spray, non-oil gloss, dry brush, and the metal bits, and most of the model is done. But what that lets you do is focus on detail placement and the other bits and basing and stuff like that. And that crypt deck has like, it's not a perfect way of judging things, but like, it's interesting what blows up on Instagram and what doesn't. And like the crypt deck is one of the most popular things I've ever posted to my Instagram feed. Cool. And I think being 40k helps because there are far more 40k fans around.
Yeah.
But there's also a sense of like, I'm learning a lot about how to like, you know, sort of get to the point where a model really like, does everything it needs to do. You know, like
the fantasy just shouts out.
Like, that model is expressing what I want it to express. Done. You know, like usually means a little bit of extra effort with basing, that kind of thing. But and this will be, maybe this is the story of this year for me, but like I really want to figure out what the things are that really actually make something appealing to someone else. Because I think I've needed no help finding ways to make things more complicated, or to find ways of sort of pleasing myself with like subtle color variations between models in a unit and things that mean something to me, but aren't observable unless you stare at my models, which no one will ever do other than me. Right. Whereas, you know, and this links back to discussions I think we've had on this podcast before about like what kind of armies win best army competitions at tournaments and things, where I suspect it's as often to do with a bold color choice and great basing as it is to do with like the technical execution of anything in particular. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Right. Like what looks good to people versus what you are personally kind of like invested in is a really interesting tension to me. So I did that crypt deck, really enjoyed painting it. And then I did a Chaos Lord, which had been sitting on my painting desk for a while, and finishing up was really fun, but really challenging in trying to like pick the right colors, for what I am hoping to do. But I also really enjoyed it to the extent that it was one of the things that inspired, those two models inspired me going out and just spending a decent number of pounds on armies for both Slaves to Darkness and Necrons, because it was like, I really like both of these, and I like the considerations that have gone into it. Like trying to set a color scheme for Chaos Undivided, where I have been working on having like a lot of metals that are like relatively neutral, like just sort of dark iron and like dull gold, but like with other colors kind of orbiting it in interesting ways. So I repainted his weapon, so it's got this kind of like flaming ember effect, which I've used on a bunch of different things. But it is for me a sort of more neutral kind of chaos effect. Like regular colored flame is like a relatively neutral chaos thing.
Right.
Whereas the green flame that is significant to my Zinch stuff is more specific to them. And also having the cape, which goes to dark red at the bottom, and having rather than being stood on like a grassy field, he stood on a kind of, it looks like he's standing on a barbecue. There's no other way of getting around it, but he looks like he's standing on a barbecue. Yeah. But like trying to sort of find these places to put interesting bursts of color in among this kind of like flat background is kind of like how I want to do Slaves to Darkness, where you sort of see the kind of, the freakiness growing out at the edges of those models. And that's been really, really interesting and fun to plan. And it's given me an idea actually for how I want to do my Slaves to Darkness. And I don't know if this idea is really going to hold up from a fictional point of view, but the idea is I kind of want to have, you know, Chaos Undivided literally, so that, you know, is sort of free form worship of all of the gods, but have them angling slightly more towards Slanesh, because the idea being rather than Slanesh meaning this sort of explosion of sort of sensory, you know, bright purple tentacles, it being more about like the sort of the arrogance and the ego and the nihilism that comes with believing yourself to be capable of sort of yoking every individual god to your needs, what you want. Yeah. So it's like the sort of the monstrous ego of it is the Slaneshi element. Right. And so like even my sort of, like the chaos stuff I've done so far, which are these like black helms over dark armor, there's like this sort of like Slaneshi arrogance bubbling up underneath. And so the Slaneshness is sort of expressed through like nihilism rather than sort of excess, but it might be just about to bubble over into excess. It's like something I've been thinking about with those guys. And then I took a big left turn and did a bunch more Khorne, which you mentioned, because we had we were playing a skirmish game, but also, you know, it's fun to just bounce into something completely different.
Yeah.
So, I painted a Aspiring Deathbringer as a leader for my Khorne army. Really pleased with how he came out. Really fun to paint, fun to build a base for. And I also painted a leader for the Skull Reapers, which are kind of like the Khorne elite infantry, like the Khorne paladin equivalent.
Yeah.
Who is a man who will feature somewhat in our battle report, which we have already recorded. So I'm kind of speaking out of order a little bit here, but like, that is an older sculpt. I think it might be an End Times era sculpt, but it's the same kit that makes the Wrathmongers, which I don't really like, who are the people with flails, basically. This is the variant where they have like various dual demonic weapons. And it's basically a topless dude with, a big demon axe. And I've been, you know, trying to figure out what like demon flesh looks like for my Khorne, who have much more muted color scheme. So it's sort of like dark grey flesh that's catching fire at the edges. But also this guy's been blessed with demonic gifts, and I didn't realize how dumb this model was till I built it. But that demonic gifts in this case means that he has a big crab claw and a scorpion tail. And I guess maybe it's a scorpion tail, but it's a weird looking guy, Tom.
He's a weird looking guy, for sure. His whole facial expression and everything, like everything about him is slightly weird.
Yeah. It's just like, I think the way I've tried to like frame him is, you know, technically he's clearly more blessed with sort of cornate, you know, demonic gifts than anyone else in this growing Khorne force. But I suspect just no one likes him because he got weird ones. Like everyone wants to turn into a fucking Balrog, right? That's the promise.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Khorne,
You know,
for sure.
like I've turned into a bit of a crab. Like, yeah, all right, Ian.
Yeah. You've mutated sideways.
Yeah, exactly.
Trying to mutate upwards.
But it's been really fun to just bounce around between projects like that and tick things off the list. And I'm adding to the list probably at a rate I won't catch up with, but,
It gives you the freedom to pivot, doesn't it? Like having those models there, it just means like, well, maybe this weekend I'll break out this battle force and start trying this.
Yeah, and I think the old mindset I had was like, I need to finish my Tzeentch before I do anything else. And I've still got base-coated Kyric Acolytes waiting to be painted, and they will get painted. Next thing on my painting table, however, is the Dark Oath for Underworlds.
Yeah.
And like, but it teaches you what you actually enjoy. I think just jumping around, like, I realized that I wasn't excited about painting Space Marines, so I got rid of my Space Marines.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll just do other things for a while. And I've still got some, you know, I've got Adeptus Mechanicus and Genestealer Cults stuff left over from Forgebane and the Kill Team box, but I don't mind if they take a while to get to.
Yeah.
Because I love both sets of models, but, you know, I'd love to do a Necron army this year, I think. And I just kind of, yeah, it helps a lot to, I think, just sort of paint lots of different things and let that guide what your interest actually is.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's been quite positive, really.
Yeah, it's been positive.
I mean, it obviously led to me completely breaking my rule about expanding my chamber, but, you know.
No, that's really cool. I love the idea. To me, Blackstone Fortress feels like a series of short burst projects because they're all made of different materials. They've all got different vibes and color schemes and things. And I found that really refreshing as well. It's one of the things I've most enjoyed about it. Also, not having to paint gold. Hardly ever on anything. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is this method of painting has made it feel less like a job because often I think you get into the sense of like, even I was, you know, fully planning to keep working through Blackstone Fortress till I finished it, but that felt like a way for my brain to go, this is when you know you're done. You know, this is a way to paint a lot of different things without feeling like you're going completely off the rails.
Yeah.
And actually it's been fun to just bounce between things and, you know, recently my painting has taken place in our living room and my partner Pip's really into jigsaws. So we sort of sit and I paint and she does a puzzle and it's really nice.
Yeah,
it's like, and it doesn't really matter what I'm painting because it's not become about what I'm actually doing. It's become about sort of just the time you spend doing it. And that is, I think, a much healthier approach. And it's, I'm still processing this and it might be something I return to, but it's changed the way I think about my chain pile as well, because it's gone from being, oh God, I've got to finish this or else I have wasted this investment or whatever to being, okay, this is what I've got. What do I actually want to do?
Yeah.
And so it actually becomes a sort of broader possibility space of like, maybe I fancy doing some terrain. I'll go and do some of that terrain I've been leaving, rather than like, okay, must plan and schedule this because the goal is to no longer have this, you know?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So let's talk about this month's game we played.
Yeah, it feels like after the last game we played, the biggest game of Age of Sigmar we've ever played, with massive consequences, it felt like we had to reset, maybe take the scale down a little bit.
Yeah, and this is our also opportunity to try out the new Age of Sigmar Skirmish rules.
Yep.
Which were published in White Dwarf. And also to be clear, because we've done this before, we're recording this battle report or battle discussion, I guess, first, ahead of doing the rest of the podcast. So I suspect we're going to talk about White Dwarf and some of the things in this month's issue. But yes, this is us bouncing off the skirmish element specifically and kind of putting these rules to the test.
Yep.
And so, this was, I don't think I was necessarily expecting them to completely reissue Skirmish through the magazine like this.
No.
And it is a very lightweight set of adjustments in order to make Skirmish play possible. But at a top level, I kind of, I immediately appreciate the kind of sensible changes that have been made, particularly when it comes to things like, warband composition. And so on.
Yeah, it loosens things up a little bit. Like your warband has to adhere to one of the Grand Alliances, but there are no particular rules for what percentage of your force is made up of any particular, army within that Grand Alliance. So you could create a kind of a cool mishmash mob of order or chaos or something like that and run them all together. We didn't today. We stuck to our favourite kind of, Grand Alliances. But yeah, that's a really nice move. It feels like the pointing is less restrictive in terms of the heroes you can take and stuff like that. Feels like there's more available at least.
Yeah. So, one of the biggest changes is determining the sort of skirmish points value of a unit is a formula now rather than sort of skirmish points values being issued.
Yes.
Which means this rule set, even though it's obviously never going to be perfect, and I think skirmish is still a part of the game where you kind of agree to certain common sense kind of, let's not mess around with this
sure
sort of elements. But with that in mind, it's still possible to sort of, kind of create a warband out of any model you've got as long as it has a points value for regular Age of Sigmar match play, which is a really good kind of mechanism. And I suspect, because I think I'm listening to some of the recent official, Warhammer Age of Sigmar podcasts and things, I know that the design team for the game has a formula for determining approximately what the points value of like a new unit should be.
Right.
Based on its wound count, amount of attacks, that kind of thing.
Yeah, makes sense.
And I suspect that this is a sort of a version of that, like a reverse engineered version of that. So, for in a given unit, you take the sort of match play points cost of that unit and then divide it by the minimum size of that unit in regular Age of Sigmar to get the per model points value. And then add 5 points if it's a unit champion with whatever buff that gives you, and add 5 points if it has a special weapon with whatever benefits that gives you. And that's a really simple formula that actually works really well because it's still, you feel like you're in, in old skirmish, you maybe feel like you're gaming the system a bit, making sure all your guys have special weapons or whatever.
Yeah.
Now it feels like an investment.
Yeah.
Like sort of bolting a gear system onto AOS, which it doesn't otherwise have.
It's not too complicated. And I really like the idea that the barrier for having access to skirmish rules is a £6 magazine rather than maybe like I can't remember how much the book was for
a £6 book. It wasn't a very expensive book.
Oh, what, the original Skirmish?
Yeah.
Oh, that's reasonable then. But yeah, I like the idea it's kind of part of the new White Dwarf and that increases the scope of what White Dwarf could do, which I'm sure we've spoken about already in the podcast. But yeah, it works really well. And I think it's good. I think you do have to, as Chris says, just common sense it and narrative it and not sort of, I think there's going to be stuff that breaks it inevitably. There's going to be certain hero combinations and like, the ridiculous brand switch spell and the way that targets units, every individual is a unit. That stuff is still going to be like overpowered probably. But playing sensibly, it's a perfectly good setup and you're going to get some good games out of it. And the White Dwarf comes with a bunch of scenarios as well, which are, like loads.
And I think it's an ongoing support thing as well. So they're going to give campaign rules and more scenarios in the next.
Yeah, nice.
In the next issue. So
it's going to grow.
This wasn't necessarily the start of a skirmish campaign for us or with any persistence. It was just us trying out the rules.
Yeah.
But it was an excuse to get playing again. And I think it's been a while since both of us played AOS. It was kind of a nice.
Yeah. To slightly relearn some stuff. I don't know, a few rules checks, but yeah,
Yeah, it's
ultimately
good.
easy
So,
enough.
I wanted to bring Khorne to this, so the new Khorne stuff that I had painted up, so my aspiring Deathbringer and ludicrous Scorpion Man,
He's hilarious. No, we don't
who is a Skull Reaper champion who has a scorpion tail and a scorpion claw and big horns, and I think has been blessed by Khorne with just looking like a dickhead.
Yeah, there's a sense he's not very well liked within the warband.
But it's nice to have a few more extra sort of models in the Khorne warband. And actually one big change. So we went for 250 points pretty much. We ended up close to 245 for balance, but 250 points is the sort of recommended match play level for new skirmish. And compared to what you would get at the kind of recommended starting point for old skirmish, you get dramatically more. So, old skirmish had the problem of you needed to have a hero and a few other models to start with.
Yeah.
And that was impossible for some factions because the heroes would be like, starting point values would be 25 to 30 points. And you'd have a hero that was 24 points. And it was like, okay, that's almost my entire thing.
Yeah.
Whereas both of us had 100-point heroes and like a decent chunk of extra models. So I had my aspiring Deathbringer, 3 regular Blood Warriors with 2 weapons, the Skull Reaper champion Scorpion Man, and a Blood Crusher. So a big metal man riding a big metal rhino.
Yeah, he looks rad. I wanted to try and use some Stormcast units I never really get the chance to use in match play or larger scale games because they're perhaps not as efficient, but in skirmish they're a laugh. So I took 3 Gryph-hounds, and I took a Prosecutor, who I never tend to normally use in the games, even though they're not bad. And the hero was a Knight Zephyros.
I really love that model.
Yeah, the model's super good, especially if she leaves me off a rock with 2 axes, about to mess up some heroes. She's basically a Stormcast assassin, really. Like, the idea is that she's super fast, and that she can ride the Winds Etheric on the back of some Gryph charges, if there are any Gryph charges around, and then pop out and murder a hero. That's kind of her whole fantasy, like what she's about. And what else did I have? I also had her bodyguard, which is a Sequitur with a great mace. And that was it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's more manageable and mobile. Yeah.
And this also gave us our kind of like story hook, because this is the first AOS game we've played since the big honk that signaled the end of the last campaign. This isn't necessarily the start of a new arc, but something I've been thinking about the way that Tom winning that campaign affects the landscape of the story is it basically makes it very difficult. Now that all of the sort of realm gates are within the control of order, that kind of thing, it makes it very difficult for demons to manifest. So like my old kind of demon heavy force is kind of going away.
Yeah.
And makes it very difficult for them to manifest in this particular part of the realm of metal. But it's not, but that doesn't mean that every chaos worshipper has vanished, or these sort of old chaos factions that have been knocking around have gone. So it's more like the sort of followers of Khorne, Slaves to Darkness, also Tzeentch cultists and things have kind of gone underground. And now the sort of task facing the Stormcast less sort of, rather than defending against the kind of massive onslaught from one particularly corrupted part of the landscape, it's more like kind of guerrilla war and like, trying to counter these sort of chaos forces wherever they rise up. And I think that gives a nice role for your Stormcast Vanguard to play. Yeah. Because that is really what they're for in the story as well.
That's their whole purpose and their whole fantasy is that. I like the idea that maybe Fort Tantris has been rebuilt and they're actually like bastions of order now. And actually, the Stormcast activity here is more about sending out raiding parties. And the Knight Zephyros is perfect for that because she's an assassin. Like, she's designed to just target certain corrupt elements, just carve them out, destroy them, and then return to base. So this was one of those raids, I think. And the Prosecutor, who's like a winged Stormcast with a pair of hammers that they can throw. He was basically like a scout who goes ahead, and the others are on the ground, and it's like a fast attack force that seeks out chaos and then strikes when they spot a good target. Yeah. That's what happened in this skirmish battle.
I think that's the thing I really like about skirmish battles is they feel much closer to the way Warhammer combat happens in the novels, where you have this sort of mix of different units.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you can kind of imagine the personalities of
the individuals,
which is the point of skirmish combat, I think, in every game system.
Yeah.
So my Khorne force, I think I've decided now, I think I may have I've said this, that I'm kind of happy to keep my Khorne force to kind of like an elite 1,000 points and not kind of overdo Khorne beyond that. So I've always seen my kind of Deathbringer as being probably the leader of this army, like rather than going for a Mighty Lord of Khorne or one of the kind of more traditional leaders.
Yeah.
Because I really like the model. So I kind of like the idea that this might have been like a raid by Khorne, but with the Zephyros coming in, maybe with the express purpose of both repelling this sort of chaos force, but also particularly assassinating these leaders, like coming in to kind of like try and cut their head off, the 8-headed snake.
Absolutely. And I think so we did play an objective-based game with 3 objectives. So there's an objective capture involved, but it was definitely, I think, for the Zephyros that she hunts heads. That's with 2 twin axes and lightning fast strikes. Like,
and
that's her
we'll
thing.
put this picture, I think, in the show notes, or maybe it's the image for this episode, but like this, so both the Deathbringer and the Knight Zephyros are running and holding 2 weapons in a kind of, in sort of matched poses. They're running in different directions, which is cool because it means that they naturally charge one another. Like, like I had this thought while we were playing this game that like if I ever wanted to do a dual diorama, I might just take the Deathbringer I've already done and paint up a Zephyros facing him, because they really naturally
the pose is really supernatural.
So I suspect we've got another rivalry on our hands between 2 different heroes.
New heroes and new styles. Like, anyone who heard the last podcast knows how messed up Tantris is now. He's just so broken. And I like the idea of these kind of fresh new recruits coming in and actually shaking things up and, a different type of war, different type of army.
Yeah, so the scenario we played was from the New White Dwarf. It's called Hold the Center, and it's basically, a fairly, like, so it's sort of diagonal deployment, but in a sensible way that it wasn't too difficult to figure out.
Yeah.
3 objectives, 1 in the center between the 2 deployment zones and 2 to the either side. The side objectives being worth 1 point each, the central one being worth 2 points. And control of an objective, which I think is a universal rule for skirmish, is determined by whoever has more models within 3 inches, rather than it being a sort of,
big bubble wholly within.
Big bubble, yeah.
Yeah. This was great because, the objectives are like 12 inches away from another objective, and given the average running speed of a model in Age of Sigmar, it's just a very well balanced. It means that they're just far enough apart for you to have to make decisions, but they're close enough that you can do runs and things to try and change up the
it means like a good charge can cover the distance between objectives, which is
so
about right.
That gives you space to actually maneuver and change the game.
So and this is interesting because we both had, like, my army had no ranged at all. So all melee weapons all the time, basically. No way of doing damage outside of the combat phase. Yeah. But loads of things that sort of react off that, which I think this time was the time I got a handle on why Khorne stuff is good. So there are fun things like the fact that Blood Warriors, always fight. So if you kill a Blood Warrior in the combat phase, it fights you immediately. So it doesn't really matter when you kill them to some extent, which in skirmish, which has, a much more, because every model is a unit, that one of the best parts of AOS, that kind of deciding who goes first in combat, becomes much more complicated because there's loads of it happening.
Yeah.
But also Blood Warriors complicating that in a really cool way, because you can maybe fight and kill a Blood Warrior, but it will still get to fight you. So that kind of introduced all these really cool complexities, but like that compared to like the sheer durability of the Stormcast, I don't know, it was we got a fun game out of basically just melee combats, which I really liked.
And that's something that you've kind of perhaps always missed out of Siege, because Siege has some melee competencies, but not much really, like corner there to fight. And I do really, really like the close combat phase of the game. I think it's still my favourite because of the activations thing. Yeah. And because it always matters. And because you have so many ways of moving in and out of combat, like run retreats. If you've got flying units, they can retreat in certain ways to get onto objectives. So I always find getting in and out of combat to be a really interesting game, and the combat itself with activations to be a really interesting game as well. I think that whole phase is, they've nailed it really. Yeah, yeah. And it works really well in Skirmish. So in Skirmish, every single individual counts as a unit basically. So you activate them all separately as though there's different units, which is why that you get a lot of intrigue in the combat phase.
So we should talk about what went down. So basically I finished setting up first, which meant that, so you took the first turn, basically.
I did. Yeah. Basically rushed out. I sent the dogs after one objective, all of them. I sent the prosecutor, perhaps unwisely, to the central objective. And I would say the central objective scores 2 and the peripheral objective score 1 each. So there's always, it's a pretty standard Warhammer scenario balance. I lined up the Zephyros and her, sort of bodyguard, the Sequitur, to go after the other peripheral point. and basically just moved out and just scored 4 points straight off the bat. I've got a few like basic ranged attacks, but they whiffed if they're in range, and that was it. It was basically just straighthtforward first turn.
Yeah.
Grab the objective, score 4, and now try not to get too messed up for the rest of the game to try and hold on to that 4 lead.
Right, yeah. So my first turn, because my plan had been from the start, wait to see where you're deploying the dogs, and deploy the Scorpion Man, in a position to contest wherever they go, because I assumed they would go for one of the objectives. And the reason for that is the Scorpion, I misunderstood something about, and I keep forgetting this about the dogs, is that the dogs have more wounds than Stormcast.
They do. They don't have any armor save, but they've got 3 wounds each.
Yeah, so I always assumed they are going to be easier to kill than Stormcast, and I think it's somewhat of a toss-up if you have Rend. Like, it's, because Rend doesn't do anything against the dogs because they don't have saves.
Yeah, they don't care, for sure.
So the extra wounds, but the idea is, so the Scorpion Man, one of his rules is, when he kills in Skirmish, it's interesting because the way it works in base AOS is when you've killed a number of models equal to the current number of models in the Skull Reaper unit, they reroll failed hits.
Yeah.
And when you've killed double the number of models, compared to the number of models in the Skull Reaper units, they reroll, wounds as well. But with one Skull Reaper, that means 1 kill is reroll hits, 2 kills is reroll wounds.
Yeah.
Which is a nice way of bending skirmish towards to get an advantage. So my idea was always throw the Scorpion Man at the dogs so he can kill them just get the buff, basically. That was actually not a great idea because the dogs collectively amount to like 9 wounds worth of dog. But anyway, so you'd send all the dogs in one direction, so I sent him in that direction. And then I sent the Blood Crusher. Basically, I was in the position where even though Blood Warriors are quite slow, 5-inch move, all of them would be able to move normally into a sort of 7 or 8-inch charge. And then I got a really good series of charges off. So in that one charge phase, the Scorpion Man made it into the dogs, and therefore contesting that objective. My leader and another Blood Warrior made it into the Prosecutor in the middle, and the Skull Crusher on his Rhino kind of burst through a little ruined doorway and smashed into both. He rolled a 6, so it was a 12-inch charge. Smashed into both the Sequitur and the Zephyros. And because he has a chance to do mortal wounds when he charges, he did 1 mortal wound to the Sequitur. But then in that combat phase, I whiffed almost everything. Like the Skullcrusher whiffed everything. My leader whiffed everything. So the Scorpion Man did 1 wound to a dog with his scorpion tail.
Yes.
And that was it. Because the other wound was the mortal wound to the Sequitur, but that wasn't in the combat phase. That was just
a charge.
The charge thing.
Yeah.
So it was a sort of a really good sort of high impact kind of start, but it meant that I couldn't get any of the directives off you because, I could get the central one off you because I outnumbered you there.
Yeah.
But the rest of it was just sort of like, oh shit. And I lost the, Skull Crusher for my trouble. Got torn apart by the Sequitur and your Zephyros.
Yep. Got his head chopped off. And that was quite a lot of wounds in that big old boar. So I was quite pleased to have him off, and he's quite mobile as well. So like if he claims 1 point and kills some stuff, he can just go to another place and be replaced by a mook. So yeah, it was an interestingly poised. I like these multiple objective skirmish battles. Our favourite is that we tend to play normally is, the treasure hunt one where there are which I think they've adapted slightly to have 5 points now rather than 4. Those are the ones where you roll to activate them. But in this, it's just, how can you hold what, for how long? And it was, so after that, I think I got the turn back.
Yeah, there were no double turns in this whole game.
No, actually, it was actually like back and forth for the whole thing, wasn't it?
Actually, maybe right at the end there was a double turn. But yeah.
So essentially the top, objective where my, Zephyros and Sequitur had killed the boar, I left the Sequitur on 1 wound on that top objective just to sort of like keep hold of that 1 pointer.
Yeah.
And sent the Zephyros after the center, having seen what she could probably actually do. I also had one of the items on her, artifacts, that gave her extra rend, so she's like rend 2 with 6 attacks, which is very good against
Heavily armored Khorne.
Heavily armored Khorne, yeah. So she was like pretty well placed to take out a lot of them. So she started rushing towards the middle.
You also committed your 3rd dog to the big multi-dog versus Scorpion Man melee.
It was 3 dogs on Scorpion Man. And that was very good photos from that absurd combat. And that was it. Yeah, I can't remember what I really killed. I think I just...
that turn, that combat phase went heavily towards me, despite it being your second turn.
Right.
I killed the Prosecutor, a dog, with the tail again. His demon axe was useless. The tail was doing all the work. And,
the Secretary was like in transit. No, the Zephyros was in transit.
Yeah, she was running between the two.
Yeah. That was it. And then it was over to you.
Yeah. And so I sort of had a decision to make once the Prosecutor had died I realized that I didn't want to be fighting your Zephyros on one of the objectives.
Right.
I'd rather leave someone on the objective to keep scoring it.
Yes.
And fight you in the middle, basically where you were. So I charged, the way I sort of moved, the two guys that had failed their charges and the guys who charged into the middle was to put one person onto that central point to score the 2 points. Cause I was at a heavy points deficit at the start and then really wasn't able to score something in my first turns because all I could do was contest.
Yeah. And
have maybe an equal number of people on those points. And so I moved my general and another blood warrior off the central point and threw them towards the Zephyros, and then put another guy in a position where, depending on the size of his charge roll, he could either charge the Secretary in the corner or your general.
Yeah. And
the thought there was that, so the Deathbringer has a really good command ability, and so command points are a fun thing, like being able to reroll charges or set run rolls to 6 is just as important in skirmish as it is in the regular game. And actually, because there are fewer units and that sort of bubble of command around your general is so important, it's actually a kind of a fun thing to be able to do.
Yeah.
The Deathbringer's command ability adds +1 to the attacks characteristics of every weapon carried by a Mortal Khorne model within 10 inches of him,
it's really nice.
Which is really good because in having this fight with the Zephyros in the sort of no man's land between two objectives, it covered both of the objectives as well as the fight in the center.
Yeah.
So it meant that I could throw a Blood Warrior into your Sequitur in the corner, amp him up with that command ability, and then that Blood Warrior was capable of taking the Sequitur out and seizing that corner objective from me.
Yeah.
Grab the center with someone who wasn't in charge range. The endless dogfight just continues in the corner.
Yeah. They really cancel each other out.
They just, so maybe we haven't dwelled on that enough. Basically, neither were able to do anything to each other, really. 3 dogs versus 1 scorpion man. That's a wash.
That's a wash. Yeah. They'll stay there forever.
So they were just sort of fighting each other in the corner forever. And then it was this huge clash between a big chunk of my remaining stuff and the Zephyros.
Yeah.
And, my general with his 6 to 8 attacks when he uses his own command ability, the turn he had 8 attacks, he whiffed all of them.
None of them went.
So, and it actually created this really sort of dramatic moment because, even though they're quite similar, like, by default, they're both dual wielding heroes that cost 100 points with 6 attacks.
Yeah.
The Zephyros is a hero assassin and the Deathbringer is designed to wade through chaff. So it felt appropriate that when they met each other, she had quite a big advantage.
She just neutralized him in combat. Like, I could imagine them just like a blur of axes and she was like deflecting all these blows as he was like trying to attack.
It was a cool duel, basically.
It was a cool duel, yeah. They were really well matched. I can't remember what happened next. I think it was, so I had lost the top, peripheral point. The central one you had already, and there was a kind of stalemate happening towards the other end. And basically like, I basically stayed in this situation for a while, just killing stuff with the Zephyros.
Yeah.
So like another Blood Warrior charged her, I think
you also had to retreat. So you did eventually lose 2 of the dogs.
I did.
And retreat the 3rd one.
Yes. So I sort of abandoned that bottom point and thought, well, if I'm going to have any chance at all of scoring enough, I need to get this dog in range of the central point. So I, ran, and used command point to turn the run to a 6, and the dogs are pretty quick anyway. So the dog was almost able to get into range to cancel out that point or, start to give me a chance to retreat onto it with my Zephyros and score it. But there was the 3-inch bubble from the one, Blood Warrior who's standing there that's just about stopped him from getting in range of the point. So wasn't quite able to cap it so dramatically. And then meanwhile the Zephyros was just like chopping up a Blood Warrior and sort of like laying into your general. Yeah,
so the Zephyros and my general and the Deathbringer got each other down to 1 wound and 2 wounds.
Yeah.
Respectively. The Zephyros managed to kill my Deathbringer.
Yep.
But I got through the battle shock without a problem, which is good. By this point, I'd sort of gotten quite a big points lead. the Blood Warrior on the point managed to kill the dog that had rushed towards him. And then sort of on my final turn, my 5th turn, I threw basically every remaining Blood Warrior at the Zephyros, more for plot reasons than anything else. And they got murdered to a single man remaining. And then on your final turn, you managed to kill that guy.
Yes.
But when Blood Warriors die, they also get to fight back. And then that guy, when he fought back, managed to take out the Zephyros.
Just the one wound left. So they managed to, they cleaved each other to pieces.
Which meant that there was actually a single survivor of this entire game. And it was the ridiculous Scorpion Man, who had simply run into a corner, fought some dogs, shouted a lot, and then
opened a chest. And
exactly.
Happily won the game. Everyone else was dead. It was a bloodbath.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, which is kind of a testament to the fact that it was relatively balanced despite being a kind of mad kind of mismatch of
strange mismatch
units.
Yeah, for sure. And I think from the Stormcast perspective, the story was like the Zephyros, just carving through everything that she fought pretty much until like eventually be taken down by one heroic Blood Warrior, but just going through a Deathbringer, going through like, I think she went through a couple of other Blood Warriors as well. So she just carved a swathe through the battlefield, and that feels to me like the emergence of a new hero. Like, she's really good at what she does. She's really
and a very specific rivalry.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sort of going to sort of say that I think my Deathbringer managed to survive this battle, possibly because she was unable to land a killing blow because she was ultimately taken out, even if, you know,
just swatting down.
I imagine him crawling out of the corpse pile at the end of this. She's obviously reforged somewhere.
Reforged, she'll be fine.
But, you know, like, the crab claw man comes along and like hoists him out of the...
And the guy still thinks he's an asshole.
Yeah, exactly.
No one likes the crab guy.
No one likes the crab guy. But it was really fun ending. And, I won in the end at 13 points to 6 because I'd able to hold, after that counterattack, managed to like just get a couple of turns in a row of loads of points.
Yeah, for sure.
I think the only thing that you could have done differently would be send a dog to the center sooner. If it had been like 2 dogs versus, because I think it was a bit of a wash, like 3 dogs versus 1 man, 1 crab man.
Yeah.
Was a wash.
I wasn't expecting to miss with all his axe attacks.
All the time.
So you should have killed those dogs pretty much a lot quicker. I think maybe the way I should have done it was to put my Zephyros and, the Secretary into the middle, not realizing how much they could kill, actually. Like the Secretary in particular never really got a round of combat in, outside of, you know, fighting the giant boar. But if they'd have like managed to just last a turn, I think they could have cut down a lot of Blood Warriors and kind of changed the maths of the numbers at the central point.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe that's what I would do differently. And the Prosecutor, I basically sacrificed for the first turn.
Points gain.
Yeah, so it was the first turn points gain and he neutralized the point for a turn, I think. No, he didn't. Yeah, so I could have used him better.
He did neutralize it no, he didn't, because I managed to get 2 charges.
No, I should have used him to just hold on to one of the peripheral points and just be a nuisance, basically. So yeah, because he's not very tough. He's just a normal Stormcast 4+ save 2 wounds. And he's not going to kill very much either, even as a champion with 3 attacks, because his hammers are a bit rubbish.
Yeah, I guess with an 18-inch ranged attack that the Prosecutors have, like, he could have hypothetically
poked off a Blood Warrior.
Because I was thinking about that, like, my complete lack of range, like, if there had been Judicators or like Hurricane crossbows in your army, that would have made like, because when I didn't know what you were going to bring, I had the theory that the Blood Crusher's job would be to chase wizards and ranged guys.
Right, yeah.
Like, and just try and get rid of them. Because it is a big threat to that army that they're quite slow.
Yeah.
And they have a healthy 4-up save, 2 wounds, but you're not getting any value out of the turn you're getting shot at.
Oh yeah. If it was going to be like efficient about it, I'd have taken would definitely have taken an archer, because the champion gets the mega shot. Yeah. And it only costs 5 points to upgrade them to be a champion, and they get the crazy kind of 2d6 hits arrow, that almost always hits. And that would have been pretty bad, because that's Rend 1 as well, so it'd been quite bad for heroes, pretty much most of your army. The Boltstorm, the snipers that I've used in Skirmish before, probably a bit too expensive for this, though they would have been ridiculous. Like, it would have been pretty bad. They'd have taken out a couple of things, I think. So yeah, I'd have taken some shooting if it was going to be like, I'd have taken a Paladin as well. Just 3 wounds, 4+ save, and does mortal wounds, and has a big hammer that really, really rends off like corn stuff.
Yeah.
But so if it depends how you want to build your lists really. Like if you want to, I knew I was facing corn, so I knew it'd be like loads of armor, but I just chose to take a more fun army with dogs in it.
And it was fun.
It was fun. Yeah, it was really good. I really enjoyed it.
And it's fun that we can have a sort of discussion about what did and didn't go right simply from a kind of positioning point of view rather than a sort of,
like
because we both had sort of
dice
like
view.
extremely cold and hot dice at different points. Like,
Yeah,
I had
definitely.
really good charges and terrible attacks. A couple of times when it went right, obviously, but that's how it works. But it was far more at the end about like, the specific timing of certain moments and sort of, where and when to engage, which is what it should be about. Really.
Yeah. It's really nice. And it also plays really fast. Like it was like an hour and a bit, and we were doing some looking up just to refresh ourselves, and we're using war scrolls not familiar with. It adds a bit of length, but you really can do a game in an hour if you're bashing it out and you understand the rules.
Yeah.
Which is lovely. That's a good way to play.
Yeah, it was fun.
I enjoyed it a lot.
And almost everyone died.
Everywhere. Yeah, that's good. Good sign of a good skirmish battle.
Let's wrap up with some questions, shall we?
Let's do it.
First question comes from Pete/Fee on Discord, 21 for 21 questions champion. Starting 2019 as we've always been going on. Hi there. I'm going to try that again because the beer is making me not talk good. Hi there. Wizardston and Senior Hammer.
I'll take it.
How discerning are you both when it comes to playing games with people? In the latter half of 2018, I joined a wargaming club and have played with lots of people who approach the game in a variety of different ways, in very different ways to me. This has essentially meant losing to competitive lists a lot. I still enjoy playing on a regular basis, but my question for this pod is, do you think it's worth putting in more effort to playing fewer games with people closer to my wavelength, or just enjoy the fact that I'm playing on the reg these days? Yours in pod appreciation, Pete/Fienya from Discord, to give him his full title. This is an interesting question. So at the moment I'm in a period of sort of enforced only playing games with people who, well, like you and sort of, and friends for Blackstone and very rare games of X-Wing.
A regular group of people who have a set approach to the game.
Whereas, I kind of do miss the era where I play lots of games of X-Wing, say, regularly with people from all sorts of different mindsets. But I feel like that situation is easier to be in if you yourself are a competitive player. And I think that might be the trick to why this is so complicated is that a competitive player who is there to discover different ways to win can basically eat every kind of other player there is.
Right. Yeah.
You can gobble up a narrative player and enjoy the satisfaction of winning, and you can have a chewier battle against another competitive player and learn something about your list and hopefully win as well. Whereas if you are a narrative focused player or far more casual in a different way, then you are food at the middle of that ecosystem, and it's kind of difficult to maintain enthusiasm for that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's weird. Apart from like one or two tournament experiences, a couple of tournament experiences, I've only ever played within friend groups for Age of Sigmar at least. And I've found that to be, I really enjoy the doubles tournament because there are real stakes. There are real stakes when you're playing in a tournament and you're playing against strangers and you've got a 2-hour limit, and that's exciting and stressful at the same time. It's like a totally different game at that point. It just feels like a completely different thing. And it's making decisions under pressure quickly and afterwards going back and seeing what mistakes you made is a really fun analytical process, and actually building the list is a really fun analytical process. So I find competitive gaming to be like, has an entirely different, almost long tail set fun to it that's very, very different to narrative when it comes to list building and unpacking what you've done and analysing your performance and stuff like that. But in terms of the actual interactions with other humans in that context, like, they can be brilliant, but they can break both ways, like, almost equally. Like, you can have a great time with some people who are competitive and see the game in the same way, and you get a rapport with them, and it's lovely. At the same time, you can be, like, argumentative and negative and not at all what the hobby seems like it should be about to me. I primarily approach it as a hobby, so taking a hobbyist take on it just feels more natural to me, especially if it's collaborative and storytelling. But yeah, it's a really good question. I like having, like 90% of the games being with people I know and I know have the same kind of attitude as me. And then occasionally sort of like going out and doing something a little bit different, like a tournament once in a while, just to kind of get that other side of things, just as a dose.
I think for a regular gaming group, it helps a lot to be on the same tier as in terms of attitude, is the most competitive people in that group. Like, I remember when I started getting back into this whole thing and I started playing X-Wing, and the first club I went to, I was definitely more competitively minded than a lot of people there. So I was in that position of being the person that, like, I wouldn't necessarily, like, be, well, X-Wing at that time as well was in a kind of sweet spot of balance where it wasn't necessarily even possible to netlist the hell out of it.
Right.
I subsequently look back on that as a bit of a golden age, but it was certainly possible to be trying to figure out the game at, like, a certain level where you take certain assumptions into account. So if we want to say that, like, one of the weaknesses of X-Wing, even X-Wing First Edition, even at its most balanced, was that, like, certain upgrades were basically stapled to certain pilots and certain ships.
Yes. Because
they worked so well. And so that provided, like, the competitive baseline for the game. Like, Suntir Fel, the Tight Interceptor ace, always has the talent push the limit because it fits what he does so well. And that would be like a baseline, and you'd figure out squad mates and other builds that built around that, but you would all be building from a similar set of assumptions about what the basic level of efficiency was. And if you played with someone who tried experimenting with something else on that pilot, it would be like having a different floor for the game.
Right.
Like a different kind of, variability kind of, level for the game, to the point where if it just wasn't really fun, because it's like, the shared set of assumptions are what make the small decisions you make interesting. And someone else putting themselves at a huge disadvantage doesn't help. And the problem with X-Wing that X-Wing got to is that those choices got narrower and narrower and narrower and narrower until they became, to my mind, infinitesimally small. But I went through a period of going from a club where you would play a lot of really random stuff, and it wasn't random in the sense that no thought had gone into it, but it wasn't built from the kind of, like, commonly understood competitive baseline. And so they create all this weird tension, and then eventually I started going to a different club, basically at the sort of suggestion of a friend, and encountered basically players who were much more experienced at the game, and I started to have a much better time,
right,
because all of my games were sort of on or just above my level, and I really enjoyed, like, that was my kind of golden period for X-Wing personally, because it was like every game was teaching me something, and I felt like every player was better than me, or, like, because we were all playing from a similar baseline, what ultimately mattered was individual decisions being made during the game rather than at the list building stage, which is where it really shines.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's a different way of saying the same thing. It's like, you all have to have the same list building attitude, so that your game decisions are the thing that matters. Because if you're going to a club where everyone is building lists with completely different criteria, it devalues your in-game decision making hugely, because there's just no comparing, like, a list built because you love this particular story versus a list built because this combo wins most of the time.
Yeah.
I feel like that was maybe not an answer, but, like,
I mean, it comes down to the personality of the person playing, doesn't it? Like, if you enjoy being challenged, then a competitive club works. But is it also, X-Wing doesn't really have that narrative dimension in the same way that Warhammer does necessarily. Like, it can do if you really want to, as you've done, Chris, like, fly lists that just because you love the idea of a certain aces combination from the films or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's a really fun way to approach it. But it does feel like you're trying to make your own fun in a context that doesn't really reward that. Whereas Warhammer is a bit different, because you can create context where that's tremendously rewarding.
Yeah. Warhammer is also a lot looser. That's
that's true.
Like, I think that's the other thing, is that, that's one of the really interesting dimensions of it, is that, the way that a win at all costs playstyle can manifest itself in Warhammer is not just in list building, but also in the way players might behave or express themselves when determining things like cover or range, or that kind of thing. Like, it's so complicated with Warhammer to be a good player. Not good as in successful, but, like, good as in good to play against.
Yeah.
Like, it's a lot of work to be done establishing things like being very clear about what your intentions are, being clear to understand that your opponent understands ranges and things like that. Like, it's a really proactive effort you go to be fun to play against, even if you are also competitive.
Yeah.
Whereas in X-Wing, because the rules of X-Wing are far tighter, but, like, that kind of, play to win mentality is expressed very strongly through list building. It creates a slightly different dynamic. Like, there's no winning through finagling movement distances and things in X-Wing because it's very precise.
Yeah.
But, you can certainly give yourself an advantage from the outset by min-maxing. And that creates a very different atmosphere. But yeah, like, I'm trying to sort of dial this back to Pete's original point, which I think if, the question is ultimately, would it be better to go to playing fewer games with people who are more on the wavelength versus more games that may be lower quality? And I think my answer would probably be find ways of finding value in those lower quality games and enjoy the fact that you're getting lots of them.
Yeah.
Like, maybe the answer is ultimately enjoy losing.
Yeah.
It's a tricky one though, because
I prefer almost the other one because, I know I'm investing a lot of time into a game and into transporting stuff to a place and making something happen. And I kind of want a guaranteed outcome from that, a guaranteed good social experience from that.
Yeah.
Almost. But then I'm just really not used to going to competitive events and stuff. And maybe that's something you sort of get used to and enjoy in a different way.
Yeah, I think maybe, having more different I think maybe one thing to try would be legitimately try building a proper competitive army out of what you've got. Like, try playing at that tier and see if you enjoy it, because you might do. And like, I've always quite enjoyed the feeling of playing against someone who really wants to compete when I am playing competitively, because then you can almost, because it can be a little bit embarrassing to be the competitive person in that environment. The person who really
what you mean.
You know what I mean? Like, there's like, but when you're kind of allowed to just sort of let loose and try and beat someone who's also as committed to winning as you are, that can be fun as well. So
yeah, sure.
It might be worth just play dirty for a bit and see if you enjoy it.
To field 30 sequiturs.
Indeed. The next question comes from Bug from Discord, who writes, Dear Chris Driver fan and Tom Grot Eater, with the release of Gloomspite Gitz with their new abilities and lore, I was curious as to what shenanigans you would see Grots being up to, as to explain their experience in each of the mortal realms, beyond just why not, which, with Grots, is a valid answer for any question. Many thanks, Bug from Discord. P.S. Should fanatics have 4 wounds? P.P.S. I'm very tickled with the idea of there being a smooshed grot on the Stardrake base, especially if Doom Divers are being replaced with the Ragnarok Flingers and not being added as part of the Gloomspite faction. We need to get you one of those like grots that have thrown up or smooshed and put him on the base of the Stardrake.
I've got a squished grot from Chimp. Yeah. I can't remember which kit it was. It might be the Gargant kit. But yeah, I've got a smooshed grot that is going on the base of the Stardrake, so I've just got to glue him there and paint him up. And that will be a reminder forever of that spectacular final moments of our...
That was a very good final moment.
Our entire campaign.
Should fanatics have 4 wounds? Well...
I don't know about the rules. I need to look at the rules.
I need to look at the rules, but the point is that, like, as we've discussed, a dog in Age of Sigmar has 3 wounds.
True.
Versus a God Reforged Mega Man has 2.
Yeah.
So the amount of wounds something has...
But imagine if they took so many mind altering mushrooms that they just don't feel pain.
Keith Richards.
Like Keith Richards. He could lose several arms.
How many wounds does Keith Richards have?
Oh, about, how much does Nagash have? The equivalent. Close enough. 14.
Lord of the Dead. Yeah.
He looks more and more like Nagash as the years go on.
He does, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but he's a lot more chilled out. Like, I feel like Keith Richards would forgive you far sooner than Nagash would.
Yes, you're right. He wouldn't hold a grudge forever, would he?
Yeah.
About those souls you stole.
Yeah, I don't think he has any claim to like some sort of like cosmic balance that is uniquely his. I think he's mostly just getting on with it, which is how he's lived this long.
Yeah.
So the question is, what shenanigans would you expect to see Grots getting up to explain their appearance in each of the mortal realms? It's kind of interesting question.
Yeah, what's their drive? I'm not sure. I need to read the book.
So the law is they are following the moon.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So the moon, the Mad Moon is like a kind of extra planar entity that appears in all of the mortal realms. So it kind of passes between all of them. And they follow it, but for different reasons. So like the Spider-Fang Grots believe that it's a big egg that will eventually give birth to infinite spiders.
Oh, Lord. God, that would be a bad outcome.
Yeah. And so on. I don't know. I don't remember all the exact details going out of the book, but yeah. So, I mean, them following the moon is the reason for them to show up more or less anywhere.
Well,
but there's lots of cool ideas for like why they might throw up. They throw up as well.
They do that a lot.
Yeah.
Well, so Corgus Cole from the original starter set of Age of Sigmar, his current sort of situation is that he's in a moon of his own making.
Yeah.
That's full of also, Seraphon, now, because the Seraphon love to fight demons. And so, like that, so you could invent some Gitz who just follow Corgus Cole's moon, thinking that is the bad moon.
Yeah.
Like there are so many reasons why, like, any sort of sky-based phenomenon that might look moon-like, or any vision they might have seen could drag them into any realm for any reason. Which is, great. Like, you could invent any old reason for them to be somewhere.
You could have Realm of Fire grots that were very into like particularly spicy mushrooms.
They love it. They love the heat and the fire of it. Give them their favourite visions.
Realm of Life grots that are after them big mushrooms.
Yeah, the hay, that's where the good stuff is. And the Realm of Life.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's the best.
This is
flora.
Excellent salvia.
Top salvia, yeah. You can really think about their ancestry and the people they've wronged throughout their lives.
Yeah, you
tearful goblins
hail
in the
deep
streets.
in the Realm of Life.
The Realm of Death. Death is a bit trickier, but,
why would goblins go to the realm, grots, go to the Realm of Death? It's moon heavy a lot of the time.
There's a lot of, fancy rocks in the Realm of Death. Nagash's whole plan is based on the fact that a lot of the dust and the kind of the stones of that realm have innate power, and it feels like grots might kind of enjoy collecting that, building sculptures out of that. But I'm not sure if it's not very moon based. Hard to say. There's no really kind of lunar element.
Like, I mean, there's a lot of maybe interesting mushrooms grow out of corpses.
Yeah. Oh, a kind of
like corpse fungus kind of.
Oh yeah, like a kind of there's a specific type of mushroom that grows out of insect bodies as a result of parasites, that kind of thing. Oh, what's it called?
I can't remember.
Strepsis something. Yeah, that could be a horrible thing to base your new grot army around. That's a pretty dark one, but yeah, who knows?
To think. So what we left? Realm of Metal, a kind of tricky one.
Yeah, metal is tricky actually.
There's sort of more and more metal. There's more heavily armored grots and fanatics and things now in the new set, but you could do like a hardy sort of form of like metallic squig, like sort of living lumps of ore come to life.
Well, a grot clan that loves to armor up their squigs, so they just sort of fuse armor to
barding.
As barding, and just kind of fuse stuff to squigs, and that's why they're there. And maybe one day they'll go and like as soon as they've armored up their squigs and made them powerful, they'll go back into the Realm of Life and chase a moon or something.
Indeed. So I think that leaves us with light and shadow, which
could they even get in? Could they even get into the Realm of Light? We don't know much about the Realm of Light.
I think people are in there, like so the Realm of Light is all symmetry and kind of symbolism
and lasers.
And lasers. And the Realm of Shadow is all mystery and illusion and mist and so on.
A grot's love of visions would predispose them towards the Realm of Shadow that they would enjoy. It could be just a trick of the light that gives one shaman a particular dream and a desire to go to the Realm of Shadow, and he just drags his whole clan with him. There are ways.
I think rave goblins from the Realm of Light is an army that should happen.
This has the best mirror balls of all the mortal realms, so this is where we go.
Exactly.
The mirror ball is a moon. Worship it.
Worship this.
Worship this shiny, beautiful moon.
Good. I think we definitely got to the bottom of that. But oh man, there's so many good themed armies you could do. Now I want
goblins.
There
are actually. Yeah.
Now I want goblins. Richard writes, to Arkrison Everthurston and Tomril's Shenyaheart. Also pretty good. Thanks for the many months of great podcasts. I won't say you're solely responsible for my starting to get back into GW and wargaming, but you certainly haven't helped. Now to my question, which Primarch would be most helpful in making the most of a sale at Primarch? Some criteria to get you rolling might be dealing with the crowds without making a scene, fashion sense, and an eye for a bargain. What would each of them get? Keep up the warring / trickery / mutation / hammering. Richard.
Oh, if you've read any of the Horus Heresy novels, particularly the first one or two, the way that Space Marines deal with crowds, extremely bad. They have zero chill.
I think Horus would actually be the best at dealing with a crowd. Because he's your big,
charm them.
reasonable, bald dad.
Bring them on side.
Yeah, he's very charming.
These pants are very cheap, but you don't need them just right yet. Please form an orderly queue in the name of the Emperor, please.
Yeah, but I don't think he would buy anything for himself. I think he's too proud for that.
No, he wouldn't. He's got his, like, mastercrafted power armor and all that.
Yeah. I don't know, like, maybe the better question is, like, which of them would buy something? You know, like, I think maybe, Robute Gilliman would feel compelled by the kind of contract of simply having entered a Primarch to leave having bought something.
Just out of sheer, just
sort of obligation to the kind of structures of that environment.
Also, I think that,
but he would be sort of like shunting the crowd out of the way with his honor guard.
yeah, they would not live. But he might acquire some cheap pants. Also, I feel like Robute particularly is the sort of guy who would wear exactly the same brand of pants every day and require a lot of them just to sort of cycle through. And just like a sort of certainty of, you know, regimented.
Yeah, so therefore he might not buy pants there at all.
Yeah.
Like he might get something like an umbrella because it's raining outside and that's practical.
Yeah. As a kind of gesture. Whereas Primarch is like ever cycling stock, I think would, disturb him deeply and be almost a sign of chaos, perhaps, that, you know, what is this ever cycling?
I can't imagine most of them finding much value. You know, Sanguinius is too fancy. The Lion is too secretive, I think, to ultimately shop at Primarch. He's definitely shopping a Hot Topic or equivalent. I suspect that Lehman Russ does not care about his pants at all, to the extent that he would buy them anywhere.
Well, I think
if he even wears them.
That's true. You've got Rhaegal Dawn of the Imperial Fists, and maybe some really uncomfortable underwear is kind of his thing.
The other pain
just
glove.
The itchiest undervest and underwear that he could possibly find in Primarch.
But they're so normal in Primarch, like they're not especially uncomfortable. It's just ordinary, right?
Yeah, but it's a combination of that, and there's a combination of like a weird combination of, you know, Hawaiian shirts and then completely random t-shirts from arbitrary stock they've picked up somewhere. And it's Chaos. Chaos loves that shit. Like, Chaos shops at Primarch.
So which of the Chaos Primarchs do you think?
I think that's what we've got to go to.
Primarchs, yeah.
So, for example, like Angron is just, he basically wants to be naked, but he has to have armor on. So he doesn't bother with clothes. He really doesn't care about wearing.
I'm not going to vouch for his crowd management skills.
And also that, yeah, he would be terrible at that. But of the Chaos Primarchs, I think they would shop at Primarch.
I think Fulgrim's too vain to shop at Primarch.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
Do they sell like a tunic that would go over your massive nipple armor? Because if not, Magnus has got nowhere to go.
Oh, I think it's not a bad shout for Magnus. I can imagine him in a kind of weird kind of dragon print, old school kind of,
sad Magnus. For his days off where it's like,
right.
I've fallen out with Ahriman again.
I'm going to watch this.
He doesn't listen to me at all.
Got to watch this box set on Netflix and wear my.
I just want to watch the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt and be sad. Is that so wrong?
But also colourful at the same time. Yeah, so those kind of, you know, those all kind of hippie print stuff.
Fine. Yeah, I can see.
Magnus could buy those, I suppose.
And I think Magnus would be quite good at crowd management because you'd never know he was there.
Right, yeah.
Like he would just sort of materialize at the till.
Yeah.
And then vanish again.
And then everyone would forget he was there.
Yeah.
And if in an hour of need, he could just sort of try and make himself look like a rack of crap jackets. Escape notice.
Even though he's a giant with one eye.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see a case for like Korus Korax sort of discreetly making his way. He's so much
on the sly. Yeah, just getting, something with a skull on it that.
He'd probably steal all of the clothes he gets from Primarch.
He'd shoplift he'd shoplift.
Yeah.
Out of Primarch for sure.
Arrested for shoplifting. Yeah, I don't think there's a case for necessarily like Petarabo or Ferrus Manus necessarily.
No, I don't think Manus would.
He buys all his clothes at Halfords.
He wears bikes. Exactly. Wraps them around himself.
My hands are bike now.
I'm warm now.
Yeah, trying to think who else. What other Chaos Primarchs we got? It was Alfarius. I mean, it'd be the perfect place to buy clothes if you're Alfarius, because he looks the same as everyone else.
Everyone else, yeah. Yeah. Alfarius would be there.
Maybe Alfarius is the best answer to this.
Yeah, not a big scene, but he'd appreciate the wares.
Yeah, he's also the person behind the till.
It was all along.
I've sold myself this £4 packet of 3 socks.
Not to dump on Primarch.
No, I mean, it's extremely useful place to buy white t-shirts.
Yeah.
Next up, Alistair writes, Dear Mr. Azurite and Mr. Feathers. Okay.
Cool.
If time and money were no object, what full army conversion project would you undertake? Erudite Zangor Free Guild? Gene Skaven Cults? What is your mad dream army? Thanks for keeping on podding the mortal realms. Alistair. Ooh, it's a good question. It's a very good question.
It is. The Genestealer Cult kits are designed to be really switchable with other parts of the Warhammer range, and you could actually do a very good Genestealer Cults Mechanicus mashup, I think.
Yeah.
Lots of scope there.
I'm trying to challenge myself to think of an AOS thing, because I feel like that's actually harder. Like, my friend Jay, who's the manager of Games Workshop in Bath, has a really cool Free Guild Realm of Metal army, which is half Mechanicus stuff, and it works really well in AOS. Like Stormcast bodies with pistols for hands. Incredible beer knocking skill there, Tom. It's gone under your chair. It's the other way. Enjoy this podcast, listeners, as we narrate Tom finding an empty beer can live. We found it. All good.
That sounds awesome.
I think, what's missing that I would love to see?
You could do some good, Mechanicus Caradron stuff with the kind of mechanical arms and stuff like that. I think you could buff up some heroes with those extras.
I think there's loads of stuff to be done with, like, there's an idea I had for ages, which is I'd love to do, like, I don't know if it's necessarily a Flesh Eater Courts thing, but a death thing, which would be like full death, but mostly Bretonnians, but there would have to be almost new loads of original sculpting work.
Yeah.
The idea being like some kind of like wild hunt, but dead kind of scenario, like the sort of knightly order, ghostly knightly order riding to battle, but with all of that kind of Bretonian regalia, like the Arthurian stuff.
Yeah, I really wanted to convert some Drukhari vessels into a Stormcast chariot, flying chariot, or so a chariot where the kind of the chariot itself could be made of old Dark Elf chariot bits, or maybe new like Drukhari bits as well. And the chariot itself would be held aloft by two prosecutors, holding chains and just kind of flying above it. And it would be pulled by Dracoths or something, like 4 of them.
That's really cool.
And it would be absolutely absurd and just quite in fitting with the Stormcast kind of angelic, I don't know, kind of angelic, something that you'd come out of the sky and just wreck an entire Chaos Army by itself would be just the most ostentatious way of doing it.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah. I thought about it too much.
I think actually vampire counts for me, like, cause the Blood Knight kit is disproportionately expensive and old.
Right.
But I fucking love vampire counts, and I wish they were more viable as an army by themselves, like,
absolutely,
without skeletons as infantry, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I think converting up a full army of vampire foot soldiers and things would be
rad. Oh, Chimp did a really good, has converted a really nice, dragon, are they Dragon Knights? Blood Knights?
Blood Knights.
Yeah. He's converted a really nice unit of Blood Knights from, I can't remember the bits he's used, but it's super, super nice. And yeah, those kits are absurd. Like the originals are really ridiculous.
I remember when, I think it was this time last year, I was really, really hoping they would bring them back, and they haven't. So yeah. Next question comes from Kingsley, who writes, the recent 40k box games seem to be developing the types of characters that have existed in the margins of the lore for decades but don't fit into a traditional army. What types of character would you like to see brought to the table in a future AOS, Warhammer Quest, or Kill Team equivalent? Personally, I'd like to see the old school vampire counts reimagined for the villain role, though I'm not sure if that fits with the current lore. Cheers, Kingsley. So obviously touching on what you're saying. He totally does.
Yep.
Yeah, like, I feel like this is a really interesting question, because I think 40k and AOS have opposite problems in some ways, where 40k has abundant sort of large armies that are almost unfathomably large, like Tyranids or Necrons or Tau or things like that. But also that have the effect of pushing a lot of marginal stuff to the margins, so that it can't really be featured anywhere else except out of a specialist game. So rogue traders and things. The scale of a 40k army is now so kind of big that it doesn't make sense to bring them into the main game.
No.
But this is the perfect space for them. But actually AOS still has so much room for major factions.
Yeah.
That it's harder to do marginal stuff, because you can imagine all of the marginal stuff you'd ever want, but what we need is more like, here are the pillars, here are the big factions that are contending.
Yeah.
And we have plenty of them, but there's so much space for more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's increasingly some room. Almost this stuff comes from the novels and from, it used to come from comics and stuff, where like it's the war bands and the kind of criminal elements that exist in order cities could themselves be spun out into, new stuff. And they feature in stuff like Spirit Shadows has some good incidental just gangster characters who turn up, and they could be in a box game eventually, and I think a lot of people who are writing this fiction are putting hooks in for future things. A sort of 3-paragraph character interaction could one day become a box game in any of 40k or AOS's settings. But AOS just hasn't had as many books and sort of like scene setting opportunities as 40k has. A tiny, tiny fraction, in fact, of what 40k has had. So yeah, there's more to be done with, AOS stuff. But yeah, you're right. Like, surely DW concentrating on filling out all the main armies first before they start like really bringing up those sort of ideas.
That said, I think in some ways, maybe because of the scale of the power of those main armies that are being introduced, it makes more sense for things like Free Guild or like regular humans, regular Sigmarite worshippers,
fanatics
to be at that level, that power level of like skirmish game or board game, rather than being armies. Maybe that's the position it's arrived at, where like, a regular army of just, I'm a normal human, doesn't really have a lot to offer in a game that has magically enhanced mega people everywhere.
Yeah, they can't be expected to do anything.
So it'd be a nice way for them to dig into that stuff a little bit more, like, sort of, weaponsmiths and, gunmasters and all these sort of different characters that kind of exist at the fringes of Age of Sigmar. The Order of Vizier, for example, who feature in the books.
Yeah.
As the kind of the new witch hunters. Yeah. That'd be a really cool thing to see embodied in those games.
That's really true. Like the old conception of fanatics have a different context now in AOS, and so you could have some interesting fanatic characters. And yeah, chaos cults as well are in almost every story of AOS, and there are characters and kind of cult leaders and a kind of Genestealer Cults type thing, but for chaos in AOS could work as well. But yeah, it's in development, isn't it? It's sort of to be seen what gets done with that layer of characters and new stuff.
A final question comes from Steve, who writes, Dear Chris and Tom, if you were a Blackstone Fortress hero or an Underworlds fighter, what would your Inspire condition be?
That's a very good question.
Cheers, Steve.
3.5 ales.
I was going to suggest, so I think mine might be the knowledge that the thing I haven't done yet is due tomorrow.
Yeah, deadline.
Yeah, a deadline.
Deadline anxiety.
Yeah.
Flip that card.
Yeah, exactly. Like the game ends in one round. Flip the card.
Yeah, nice.
Hobnobs. That's another suggestion, for me.
Nice cup of tea.
Personally. Yeah. My Inspire condition be. Okay, I suppose the other way of framing this is like, what's the thing that you can achieve that flips the card over for the rest of the session?
So, like, in an Inspire state, the word Inspire is good for this. Like, for some of them it's about flying into a rage. For some of them it's about, I don't know, like, getting into the zone, maybe becoming suddenly proficient at what you're really good at already. So, like, just getting into the zone, maybe just a piece of like music that helps me work, and the drop happening, and then be like, oh yeah. And now we're into it. No, it's just like headshot. Yeah,
apart from 2.5 pints. Yeah, I think it's something to do with, I think making like an excellent pun. And being able to dine out on it for a while. That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I dig that. Yeah, so are we talking about Inspire states in a combat scenario in a Warhammer 40,000 I think it's a broad competence scenario.
Okay, yeah, right.
Because I don't think well, we can answer the question, what is your Inspire state in physical combat, Tom?
Someone from a rando from the sidelines yelling, "You could do it, probably."
Yeah, exactly.
I can.
No, mine would absolutely be people chanting on a roof in the manner of the ending of Sonic Adventure 1.
Yeah. Man, I'm so pumped.
Exactly.
Let's do this.
Yeah, like, some kind of wrestling entrance would probably be mine.
That's
like, I could be easily devalued by having someone subvert or cancel my wrestling entrance.
Yeah, someone runs in and closes on you. Oh no.
In fact, a sufficiently well scheduled, plan for a given event would be sufficient for me to, like, if you could tell me, I know exactly what card we're going to play for the next 3 turns, I inspire immediately.
Yeah, there you go. Foresight.
Yeah.
Very useful.
No plan at all. Whatever the opposite of inspired is, that's what I am now.
Yeah, imagine if these, characters had an uninspired state where something really bad happens or they really fuck up, they just like get terrible. They become awful.
That'd be great.
That'd be actually quite a nice idea.
Yeah, cause mine, that for me would be like a too heavy lunch.
Right.
Like you've had like a very carby lunch.
Yep.
Time to go to sleep.
Time for metabolism to divert blood from brain.
Yeah, exactly. I'm idiot now. Good. That is all the questions we have time for this episode of Miniatures Monthly. If you'd like to send us a question for a future episode, you can email us miniatures@crateandcrowbar.com. You can also tweet us at Minis Monthly. Incredible. You can find us on Twitter at that very same address. You can find us as individuals for miniatures purposes on Instagram predominantly.
Yeah.
I'm at ExitWarp. That's EXITWARP.
I'm at Ludo Paints Minis, which is LUDO Paints Minis.
Lovely. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for listening, everyone.